We'll do it live.
We're live! Hello, everybody! Hope we haven't
What
kept you
is up?
waiting.
We were just discussing that there's going to be another Spider-Man number one. They just relaunched Amazing Spider-Man, and now in October, it's the adjective list Spider-Man is coming out with Dan Slott and Mark Bagley.
That's the title, the adjective list?
Well, no, it's just Spider-Man, but we
Oh,
was referred
okay.
to
I
it
just
as
wanted to make sure because
the
they've
adjective
gone
list
through so many.
Spider-Man,
You got,
not the
amazing, superior, Peter
just
Parker.
like there's the adjectiveless X-Men, there's the adjectiveless Spider-Man. We were calling it
Okay.
back that when it came out, and it's other people call it that too.
All right. So it's just Spider-Man. So that's volume 4, maybe? I
Who
don't know.
knows?
Yeah, it's just so
By the way,
much to keep track of.
do you know that I like telling this story because it's crazy how one person can have an impact on something. And it's like, do you know Marvel always used volume numbers, right? You know why Marvel doesn't use volume numbers anymore? Because
No.
Dan Carr got promoted from the typesetting job.
Okay.
It used to be good evening, mind the comics. When Dan was a typesetter in the 90s, what would happen was who the indicias came from the legal department. And whoever in the legal department it was that wrote up indicias, that was an entry level job. That was not, you weren't Marvel's top lawyer in filling out indicias. So they didn't really care. So that so what would happen was a book's going out. They need to paste the indicia down on that first page. This is back when stuff was physical. And so Dan would get the indicia. There was a typesetting machine that he had to type in. Then it would spit out like a stat that got pasted down on the front page. And Dan would always take it upon himself to make sure the indicia was right. To make sure, and if there was no volume number there, he'd go and check with the editor and check with legal and get the right volume number in there. So anytime there's, what is this? Is this volume 1? Is this volume 2? So Marvel always had, I don't know who did it before him, but when he was there, he did. I know because I used to fill in for him doing typesetting. So I'd have to do that. I'd do the same thing. So then, what happens is Dan gets promoted right about the same time Marvel went digital. So now they don't need a typesetter anymore because it's all desktop publishing. So now the indicia goes right from whatever lawyer at Marvel wrote it up, right to a digital file that cannot be modified, gets sent to the bullpen. And they just paste that. They know nothing about volume numbers. They know nothing about nothing. So they just paste in whatever they're given. They're not allowed to change anything because it's a legal document. So it just like Dan just got out of that line and just no one cared about volume numbers anymore. And Marvel hasn't used any volume numbers since.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it wasn't even a conscious decision. It was just that there was only one person keeping track of volume numbers, and he got promoted and was no longer in that indicia chain anymore. So then there was no people keeping track of volume numbers, so they disappeared. And it's just like it just amazes me. It's like, and nobody knows because I always see fans online because fans always liked it that Marvel used volume numbers because they could keep track of the stuff. So I always see fans go, "Oh my goodness, they don't use volume," and it's like, and the explanation for it is so ridiculous. As for why, there was no conscious decision not to use volume numbers. It was just entropy. One guy left in entropy.
I I I am not surprised.
Yeah.
Being there, watching how some things happen, where if the thing with Marvel is you never get promotions, you just got more jobs to do. And the way that I ran the library, or how I got the promotion to get the library, was, can you hold this key? That's exactly what it was. Would you mind holding this key and letting people into the library? Sure. Then it's like, the library hasn't been updated. Can you update the library? Sure. We got all these extra books. Sure. And then at one point, how I was doing the bundles.
Hmm.
And because they didn't have anyone to do the bundles.
Right. The
So it was
bundles
like,
are the free comics that got distributed all around the office. That's what the bundles are. Bundles
mhm,
of comics.
bundles of comics that we got. Now, it was a perk to us, but
Right.
it didn't cost the company any more money, because people need to understand that when you order 1,000 books from the printer, they're going to give you 1,300, because mistakes and whatever can happen. That you only still pay for that 1,000. So those extra books were going to show up anyway. So don't let anyone make you believe that it's costing Marvel extra money, because that's
Even,
what they try to say.
even
Oh,
though
if you
Ike
work for a
believed
car
that.
company. Yeah, Ike believed that, but Ike believed a lot of stuff, and yeah, there's I got to remember I signed paperwork when I left.
I
So,
did not.
oh, well, there you go.
No
So,
paperwork for me.
excellent, excellent. So, uh but the paperwork I signed just says I can't tell any lies, so I'm not telling a lie. Um, or to say anything negative. So I would do the bundles. So I would take the books and distribute it to, mainly I was distributing only to. Did I do the whole building at the time? I don't recall, because there's two sets of bundles. There was a set from 387, and
Hmm.
then that carried with me to the newer place.
40th
And
Street.
so eventually, it used to be I would deliver the bundles to people. Then it got to the point where it was like, it's just taking too much time out of my job, so I would create the bundles, send out an email, and everybody would come to me to pick up their books, and then
Right.
we just check off on the checkoff list. There always a bunch left over, always.
Right.
And since I was running the library anyway, the library would get about 5 copies.
Hmm.
But even though the library in the newer place was big, you just couldn't keep all those books, especially the loose ones,
Right.
because they would be books set to be, made into the actual bound books. But we always wanted to make sure we had 5 copies available to us, especially if we didn't have the bound book yet. And for people who don't know, the bound books are 12 issues and an annual, bounded together in a beautiful fake leather looking binder.
Hardcover. That was Marvel's. DC has a bound volume room too.
hmm So it would be black with gold lettering on the spine. And there was a company that we worked with for years that we would put these books together and sent them out. What took forever would be things like the fact that some of the comic books were only 4 issues each,
Right.
and then they would have long names.
Right.
So the Spectacular Spider-Man, Lethal Foes of Spider-Man Volume 1, 1 through 4. And then whatever. So we would try to put those 4 issues into a bunch of miniseries binders together. And anyway, that became a whole job within itself.
And the reason Wilson was in charge of the bound volume room was because people would steal the bound volumes. So you needed someone to keep track of them and have people sign them out.
Yeah, so they got signed out, signed in. We kept track of them that way. It was kind
I
of like a
think Ike
library system.
eventually sold them on eBay.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised. So you had all these books, and then you had the extra books, and we had to store the extra books. So I had cabinets all over the offices, not only my office, but my office extended to just filing cabinets. And then one day, a pencil pusher from upstairs decided we need to know how many books are in these cabinets. And
Hmm.
it was like, why? What what was the purpose of that? But they needed to know what was in all these cabinets.
Ah.
So I start making a list, and but this is coming from upstairs. This is coming from micromanagers who were pretty short, so they were micro, and they were very very adamant that they needed to know how many books we had.
Ah.
So I don't know if they were planning to sell them, or it was just something to do, or they didn't think I was busy enough. And it got to the point where I went up to Dan. And it's like, am I going to lose my job over this? Because they're rushed, because they want it like by Friday type of thing. And when I told them we have a lot of books, I can't give you the number off the head. I have 7 interns working on it because I grabbed everybody's
Yeah.
interns to help me count these books. And I never forget the words when I actually talked to the guy who was bugging me about it. It's like, there's a lot we can get it done, but I don't know if it's going to be like by Friday. And he just turned around and said, "Well, I didn't say the task was going to be easy." It's like, it's not even my job. That's not what I was hired for. And so we counted them, got it all done, send the list upstairs. But because new books come around every week, they wanted an updated list.
Every
So
week?
every week, 5 more comics to all the titles. And then I made the mistake of sending the previous week's list because I saved it incorrectly and I
Ah.
sent it up and nothing was said. Like, oh, okay.
They're not even looking.
They're not even looking. And I went to Dan. It's like, are anyone looking at these notes? Then I'm sending up. I'm CCing you. I'm CCing them. And it's like, no. Someone's reading it. Someone has to be reading it. All right. I stopped sending them. And about a year went by and nothing. It was like the most important thing I had to do in my career to get these books. And then all of a sudden, it was nothing. And then
No.
eventually I learned that the guy upstairs did not like me. And it's like, just for no other reason than I'm a happy-go-lucky guy.
Is the library still around? I'm not sure if it's still around. I've heard the DC bound volume room mentioned in recent years,
There are
but
still people who visit the DC bound volume room. So as
but
far
they
as
just
I'm
moved
aware
to
of,
an open office concept. So I don't know what they're doing with the library, and I think they got rid of the guy who was in charge of it.
I don't know. I haven't
I
heard
remember
anything new.
reading that.
I only recall them talking about it in some documentary.
Yeah.
They had shown that they had a room for it.
I maybe I'm going just by memory here, but I remember I know that in the last year, like in these DC went to an open office plan with their new because they moved out of one building and into another.
Hmm.
And open office means nobody has you just go in there and use whatever desk is open. You don't have a set place to work. Because not everybody was going into the office anymore because of COVID still.
Right.
And I heard, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think I read that the person who was longtime person who was in charge of the bound volume room was let go. So they were wondering what was going to happen to the bound volume room. This is something I read somewhere. I could be wrong, but I have a vague memory of reading that.
Mm.
Wilson was Marvel's Lucian. That's a Sandman reference. I get that only because I read Sandman Lock and Key. Otherwise, I don't get any Sandman references. But Lucian was in Lock and Key, and it was fun.
Good to
Every
know
week
because I have no idea what it was.
I was getting Sandman Lock and Key. I think it came out last year,
Oh, okay.
and the Sandman part was all new to me. I didn't know anything about all the so it was like every time I'd show the book I got this week, commenters would explain who the Sandman characters. I'm like, there's this guy.
I haven't read a Sandman book in decades.
Yeah, I never read many of them. Have you read Lock and Key at all?
Lock and Key. I've heard of the name, but no, I have not read that.
Yeah, Lucian is Sandman's librarian.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and speaking of stuff I haven't read, I got the Tales of Suspense first Hawkeye, which I've read before,
Hmm.
but I didn't know that there was a Watcher backup story in it.
Oh, yeah? I was going
Yeah,
to ask, was there a backup story to it?
a little 5 pager. Is this 6 pager? Stan Lee and Larry Lieber with George Bell slash Russos inking it.
Oh,
Two,
okay.
three, 4 page Watcher story. And once it's again, it's about the Watcher not being able to interfering.
Hmm.
But I don't think I've ever seen that Watcher story anywhere. I was like, I, I wasn't, I wasn't aware that of many Watchers because the first time I remember seeing actual Watcher stories was What If.
Right.
I didn't know there were any before that, like this 4 page one. I wonder if there's other 4 page Watcher stories.
It's possible. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't remember him popping up except in the reprints of the Fantastic Four books.
yeah. I don't remember
So
the
I know he
Watcher
was in
solo.
that, and appearing in the X-Men when they were on the
Yeah,
moon. Those
right.
are the only times, and then meeting him, so to speak, in the What If series.
Yeah, because when they reprint this first Hawkeye's been reprinted more than once,
Hmm.
and I meant they just they never
But I didn't
pretty
read
much
many
have.
of those. Was that Tales to Suspense?
Yeah, Tales of Suspense.
Were those reprinted?
No,
Yeah, oh,
They
key
have a
ones
line.
were first Hawkeye, first Black Widow.
but there
But
are
it didn't run like Marvel Triple
No,
Action was running.
no,
Okay, so I didn't really read any of those.
there are 120 pages of Tales of the Watcher stories,
yeah.
and they've never been reprinted.
Ah,
Oh wow.
where was that? Was that in Thor?
No, it was in Tales of Suspense before Captain America began,
Ah,
and then it
okay.
was the backup story in Silver Surfer when it was a 48-page magazine.
Okay, yes, those I've seen now that you mention it, but I haven't seen them in so long.
I'm
Oh, so
curious about those stories where every issue with him saying, "I can't interfere, but check this crap out," you know?
Well, a lot of them were kind of the Watcher presents, and they were retreads of old 1960s monster stories.
all right.
But
Oh,
there
okay.
are a few who are stories starring the Watchers,
Okay,
and those
yeah,
are still in Tales of
I don't think
Suspense.
I don't think I've seen any of those.
That's interesting. That I wasn't aware of.
Like I said, the Watcher story in the back of this surprised me.
Hmm.
When did Captain America? This is 57. When was
Yes.
Captain America?
So Captain America fights Iron Man in 58. It's prominent on the cover, and in 59, he starts as the backup feature.
Okay.
All right.
I
Tales
have
of
that
Suspense.
thing here somewhere.
Well, I didn't buy any books this week, but as I mentioned before, I would buy books, bring them home, and kind of pile them up in the Midtown Comics bag. And I figured, you know what would be good is to open up and see what I bought at some point in time. So it'll
Let's
be
see. Oh, pull out a
it'll be
comic.
an unbagging of what did I receive, what did I get on that day. All right, so see if I could get at least a year for you guys. And the first book I pick up doesn't have an indicia. All right.
Yeah, finding the indicia these days is whew.
Here's
Front cover, back
comics are.
cover,
All right,
last
there's an ad
page.
here for March 2020. So this series of book was bought sometime, I would assume, in 2020. So the first book we have
Let's see.
is
We'll go.
Wolverine. I have
We'll go.
no memory of buying this issue.
Oh wow, Scotty Young
Ooh.
cover.
A Scotty Young cover, Wolverine #1.
Featuring
number
Groot.
one even.
Yep.
That mean must worth $1 million by now.
Yes, the variant edition. Who knows? Marvel's X.
Okay.
Alex Ross, Jim Kruger. I got 2 issues for some reason of that one. Peter Porker Spectacular Spider Ham #2.
Ooh. He was looking for a good laugh.
Mm-hmm. Is that a Jake? That's Robinson is the cover artist.
Robinson?
Robinson.
I don't. Yeah.
Let's see if I can find his first name. Will Robinson. Oh no, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Will Robson.
Robeson.
Robson.
I think it's Robeson then.
Robeson. Written by Zeb Well. Okay. Power Rangers Ninja Turtles by IDW.
Ooh.
I love a crossover. No matter how silly it is, I love a crossover. Black
Yeah.
and white version of the same cover.
Ah. He's even buying multiple covers and doesn't know it.
Yeah. And a alternate covers for a back issue for that Marvel's X.
Ah.
So it looks like I must have saw the second issue on the shelf and decided to splurge and get the first
He
issue.
must have really liked that series, to get a back issue and then put it in a bag for 2 years and never look at it.
I never looked at it. That's right. So that's my haul for
Some
sometime in
February,
2000 and
March 2020.
okay,
It's funny.
so
I
January 2020 is the number is what's on the Ninja Turtles. Power Rangers Ninja
must
Turtles.
be January 12th. Oh, what pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, yeah.
I picked up. Tit Goblin says I picked up some of those faux editions, but I can never get into the colors, and the yellows and greens seem too vibrant. I know they're supposed to be that way, but I'm too accustomed to aged books. See, I like them bright. We've discussed this before. I hate when they make the books look faux old. That just, oh man.
Mhm.
I'm okay with the brightly colored facsimile editions. I mean, if they want to put it on a matte paper, I'm okay with that too. But I hate when they make the paper look old. That to me is just like, ugh.
Even though I've even done it myself because clients have requested,
Right,
where I made the covers look like they're old covers.
right.
And it's a cool effect, but I fear it gets used a little too many
Yeah.
times. And then I worry, can you grade the book correctly?
Yeah, I would
Because you're
find
trying
that
to look
funny
at,
too.
because
Like,
like,
ooh,
is it
sometimes I look at
perfect?
those
Is it
ones
good?
that are not only aged, they're distressed. And I'm like, wow, I'd hate to grade this book because how can you tell reality from
Exactly.
fiction?
Hmm. And
Well,
I've done that where I made some, and it looks good with being, to make it look like it's old and it's been rolled up and put behind your, put in your back pocket and stuff like that, like old comics are. But again, it's like it can be overused, and the interior of the books, sometimes changing it doesn't work too well either
yeah.
because it almost looks like it's almost as bad as getting a reprint of an old comic book and you could tell they didn't have the film, so they shot it from the page and they
Yeah.
didn't bother to spend the money to clean that page up because
Yeah.
they don't want to spend any money on it. I've ran into
Right.
that so many times where it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's like, you got to clean it up, you got to make it look better. It's like, nah, they don't care. It's like, no big deal.
So just put it out there. But that just reminded me of great discussion last week, Paolo. We're going to be back to that because I have some more comments on our Atlas discussion from last week, and something that popped into my head that I didn't think of. But I just want to mention first that the Marvel X you bought just today. I got a digital version of. They're doing a new one called Marvels. Is there Marvels? The original one, right? And now it's Marvel. Kurt Busiek's writing it. I forget who's drawing it. I just grabbed issue 5 digitally to try and read. Because I was like, oh, I want to give this a read. I like Kurt Busiek's writing in general, and the art was okay. I made it 5 or 6 pages in before I went, I can't take this. It was just superheroes standing around arguing with Amadeus Cho. And it was like, I can't take it. So he's not like Kurt Busiek. I generally like his writing, but with a lot of people, I like their indie writing, but not their Marvel or DC writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a different beast.
Right. I didn't get to see it, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
What it's like. But
I like their Marvel and DC writing. Whatever it is they're doing now is not Marvel and DC.
He likes their old timey Marvel and DC writing.
Yeah, it's like you turn Marvel and DC into one of those paperbacks, one of those those paperbacks with a girl's name on the cover, and they have different characters. They're all love stories, but they're monthly.
Would it be too costly and demand too low if the big two made a book that was on? Once again, I'll point out newsprint does not actually exist. That's an uncoded paper they're using. An alternative, the small press company sources out printers that do supermarket flyers and stuff on newsprint. That is not newsprint. That is just an uncoded paper.
And one thing that people forget about newspapers, they print millions of them.
Right.
That's what makes it cheap.
Yes.
It's not the paper itself.
Right.
And alternate prints like 8,000 copies or something.
And I'm going to tell this story again that I wish I could source. I only read it once in the 80s, and I have no idea where it came from. But they talked about the reason comics were so cheap until the 70s was they made so much newsprint during World War II that they put all the surplus up in cold storage in Canada, and it didn't run out until the early 70s. That's how much newsprint they made during the wartime. And that's why prices went up in the 70s, because all of a sudden they didn't have access to that one of the reasons, to that super cheap paper. It was a fluke that super cheap paper ever existed.
And the other thing too is that Marvel and DC, being that they're corporations, they will never bring down a price once they reach it.
Once it goes up, it does not.
Once it hits that price, it will never go down. They may occasionally print some kind of book that's like economic kids books that will be able to buy at Walmart or something like that, but that didn't work. DC tried it.
I remember talking to Tom Brevoort in the 90s about Untold Tales of Spider-Man, which was Marvel's 99-cent book. At the time, comics were what, $2? I can't remember.
$1.50. X-Men was already $1.95 because it was on the Malibu paper.
Right. But Untold Tales of Spider-Man, according to everybody who read it, was a quality book. Kurt Busiek writing it.
Pat Olaf. Pat Olaf was drawing it.
Mm-hmm. And I remember Tom Brevoort saying the lesson they learned from that was, since it was a 99-cent book, shops were reticent to stock it because they saw it as inferior to the $2 books. If it's only 99 cents, there must be something wrong with it. It's not as good a product.
No, I think the point we made to Tom at the time in Usenet, because Tom used to hang around Usenet, like so did Busiek and ECA's.
That's the word he got from upstairs, not from
but the point. What they should have made is a $1.99 book with 80 pages.
Okay, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, getting 80 pages of freaking
we do it in other markets because the material was already made in the US, and we just have to reassemble it.
Yeah, that's a tough. Just like when DC did their weekly book, I was like, "Ooh, that's a lot of work."
Yeah.
And even like Images, the Image anthology that's coming out. That's, I don't even know, was it a 48-page book, I think, or something like that. They're only doing that for a year. There's 12 issues of it. That's tough to keep up.
Yeah, we could do a 32-page weekly in 1960s around here, because one issue, one Phantom storyline. Next week, we'll get a bunch of Western stories from Italy to fill it up. Then we can do a Mandrake. We can do a Mandrake. Then we can do a Beetle Bailey. Then we can do a French comic. Then we can do a British comic. And there's material all around that's already made that can be assembled in a production line, and you have a weekly comic. But if you're the one producing your own stuff,
tough.
It's an investment.
Marvel Comics Presents was a tough book to get out. A weekly, that was not easy.
It was bi-weekly. It was
bi-weekly.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, but I imagine one editor trying to juggle 4 writers, 4 artists, then making sure you have enough the inkers, the colorists, in the letters, making sure that they can do that page, because you still have to put out the same book, but you need to bring all the art in at the same time
Yeah.
in the finished
And
story at
let's
the same.
make it a flip book on top of that too.
Because it's easy to
Why not?
And then if you have, because it was a flip book, it wasn't always a flip book. But it was a double cover.
Yes.
And if you added, if you had the characters from the different strips inside, you ended up having two artists drawing for the cover, and you had to assemble the cover. So that's actually extra work, and you have to do that twice a month.
And it's never your best-selling book either. The anthology. No. So it's like you're doing all that work for a mid-range at best selling book. That's why it doesn't get done a lot. Being an editor is easy, Paolo. You just need a whip. Says
if they're in the bullpen.
But to talk about our discussion last week, in case you missed it when we were over on Tim Howlermouse's channel, we got into a discussion about Atlas Comics and the that's a cool shirt, Jared. Yeah, it's The Wave, the famous Japanese print done with dice. Here, let me see if I can get you. It's like a gamer's version. Oh, can't quite see it. It's The Wave, but here's a bag of dice, and here are little dice men here.
That's pretty neat. I haven't seen the artwork used that way. I've seen it with Godzilla, which is always pretty cool.
One of those shirt a day sites. I got a matter of fact, I have to get some new. This one's just about worn out. So nowadays, it's like I take a photo of what's on the front of the shirt and just throw it out after that. It's like sometimes you don't want to get rid of them because it's so cool.
Right.
I'll have a photo archive. That's good enough. But we were talking about Atlas, and what was his name? Horror Mike.
Yeah.
Came because who was the artist he interviewed? Because I haven't gotten to see
Vic Carabata. He used to work mainly on the war comics around 1955, 1956.
And there were two events that happened within a couple of years of each other in the 50s. There was the Comics Code, which everybody knows about,
and the Atlas Implosion.
And the Atlas Implosion, which was Marvel all of a sudden losing their distributor at Marvel, Atlas losing their distributor, and they could only do 8 books a month through DC's distributor. And how I've forgotten the artist's name already.
Vic Carabata.
Vic Carabata. I don't think I've ever heard of him.
Yeah, well, it kind of disappeared during the 60s.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that'll do it.
And there's a bunch of guys from the Atom Age that were very good, but we don't know about because they never worked on the superheroes.
Yeah, but anyway, the Horror Mike and Paolo got into a discussion. And then Horror Mike even came on Howlermouse's channel because in his interview with Vic Caravaggio, I want to call him Caravaggio.
Carabata. Carrabotta.
Carabata. Okay. Vic Carabata said to Horror Mike when he interviewed him a few years ago that the Comics Code made him lose his job. And we were like, Comics Code didn't make him lose his job. A year or so later, the Atlas Implosion made him lose his job. And we were going through timelines and everything. We realized he was conflating the two events. It wasn't because Marvel came to the Comics. Came to the Comics Code. Okay, they were still publishing a lot of books.
Yeah. And the one of the big problems is that Horror Mike interviewed a guy who was 90 years old, trying to remember stuff that happened when he was 30.
Right. And so people, like I see it all the time. People can conflate stuff. I do it too. I always have to consult the photos I took in the 90s that have dates on them in order to know when things happen. You just don't remember that stuff.
Always check the documentation.
I have to look at the comic books to figure out time periods and stuff like that because trying to figure out when certain things happen along the line, like trying to tell my Comics Code story because I was there for it to be destroyed,
right?
And in a way, I kind of helped make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
because of just sheer
Mm.
stupidity on some of Marvel's stuff, incompetence on my own stuff, because certain things didn't get mailed out. But
Yeah.
there was a combination. But I'll tell you that story later. We can continue this.
Yeah, like I said, people always say, "Do you trust your memory?" I'm like, no, it's not my memory. I trust my system of writing things down.
And in this case, I spent a lot of time on the Grand Comics database
Right.
because I've always preferred Marvel. I decided to be, if I was going to be an expert on anything, it was going to be Marvel, and that includes going back before Fantastic Four #1. So by going through I actually checked every catalog issue that the Grand Comics database has on every comic book that Marvel ever published, and I take notes. And Vic Cara, so I know how to cross check.
Carabata, right?
Yeah, so Vic Carabata actually got more work at Marvel after the Comics Code started.
Right. And Har Mike, to his credit, saw the documentation and went, "You're right." He remembered. Vic must have remembered that wrong. But I was trying this week to find the article in the Comics Journal about the Atlas losing its distributor, the Atlas implosion, which I only ever read there. That was the only place I ever read. It was like a 3 or 4 page account. It was like the longest account I've read of that. I tried looking for it. I don't have the issues. I tried looking online. Couldn't find it. I think it must have came out, I'm thinking now, around the time Marvel bought Heroes World. But I couldn't find the issue. I'm going to have to look some more. But
the information is kind of spread out here and there in tomorrow's publishing Alter Ego.
There's one good article about it in the Comics Journal that has everything. It's like the most in-depth one I've read. I have to find it again. I don't have the issue. I don't have my Comics Journals anymore. I got rid of them years ago because I didn't have the space. But I have a bunch of them digitized. I don't know if I have that one. And then I went to Wikipedia to look up some Atlas stuff, and they actually had some interesting quotes. Once again, it's from Alter Ego and stuff. They credit it, but he's Stan Lee gives he says about the story is that Martin Goodman had his own distribution company. One of his new vice presidents talked him into getting rid of it.
Yeah, Monroe Freilich Jr.
And then they went with they farmed out the distribution, and which was all and it found their new distributor had been found guilty of restraint of trade and ordered to divest itself of the newsstands it owned. Its biggest client, George Delacourt, announced he would seek a new distributor for his Dell comics and paperbacks. The owners of American News estimated the effect they would have on their income. Then they looked at the value of the New Jersey real estate where their headquarters sat. They liquidated the company and sold the land. The company vanished without a trace in the suburban growth of the 1950s. So that's what it was. They were found. Not only were they were mobbed up and found guilty of restraint of trade because they owned the distribution and the newsstand.
Yeah, they would show up to the stand saying, "You're gonna take copies. You're gonna sell copies of these. I can't sell this, but you're still gonna take them."
But it was Dell Comics saying, "No, thank you." That was their biggest client, so that was the end. They was like, "All right, we're out of here," and that's why Martin Goodman had no distributor anymore because American News just went out of business as soon as he started using them. But then there was another interesting thing that gave me a thought. When once again, there's a little thing about Stan Lee saying what happened, but you really can't tell what happened from Stan Lee's quote. But it says in a 2003 interview, Joe Sinnott, one of the company's top artists for more than 50 years, recalled Lee citing the inventory issue as the primary cause. Stan called me and said, Martin Goodman told me to suspend operations because I have all this artwork in the house and have to use it up before I can hire you again. It turned out to be 6 months in my case.
Yeah,
May have called back some other artists later, but that's what happened with me.
Yeah, but that's what Stan Lee told Sennett. So Sennett
Right.
would think it's because of having all the artwork bunch backed up.
Right.
It's not the art backs up because it's a consequence of them losing their distributor and going with DC, who limits their output.
But that
But
also
Stan doesn't tell Sennett the mob closes down our distributor.
right, that's what got me to thinking, what were the odds that Vic Carabato even
know that.
knew?
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't know. Stan tells them, okay, we got all this art, stop producing. That's what
Right.
they know.
It's barely common knowledge now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not even common knowledge now, I should say.
No, I have to explain this to a lot of people.
So, yeah, exactly. No one, if it wasn't for that one article I read in the 90s, I wouldn't know about this. Because, like I said, that's the only place I really read in sort of in-depth article about the Atlas implosion and the newsstand distribution and what went on in-house. It's the only time I've really seen it mentioned. So it lived, Vic Carabato very may well have thought that the Comics Code did him in because no one told him about the distributor going out of business.
Yeah.
I mean,
and why would the artists know about the distributors?
Yeah, they probably knew nothing about it. I didn't think about that till after our discussion last week. I was like, odds are he knew nothing about Martin Goodman's distribution problems. He was just told there's no more work now.
Yeah, and there wasn't any, comic shop news. There's no reporting being done. And if there was reporting, and you have fanzines around, but there was no reporting the business portion of that because that's not just outside information.
Yeah,
Right.
Especially if the mob is running stuff.
Yeah, in 1957, whatever organized fandom there was, which wasn't much, they would not care at all about the business aspects.
No.
Right, not at all.
But that just Stan is fake news.
Kind of. I think I actually found about our ongoing discussion of how Stan Lee became Stan Lee. Okay. I think I found it.
Yeah.
I was checking out Nick Caputo's blog, and he had an article about the 1962 annuals that were published and giant sized issues that were published across the industry in the summer of '62.
Okay.
And that was the year that Marvel put out their first annuals.
So
unlike the other,
had a lot to do with it. You're saying?
Yeah, because there's a page in the Millie the Model annual, and he had Caputo had already done a blog article about it on 2013, and he put out this piece of. Let me see if I can share this. Share screen.
Put it up there.
Okay, see, this ad came out in Millie the Model annual. And it's got all of the teen humor titles on it.
Yep.
And Marvel didn't used to do this. They had they published 60, 70 comics a month, but they wouldn't bother doing any cross promotion. They were just there to fill up the stands. Now stands alone. Yeah. They have a limited number of titles, and they have they still don't have the superheroes. This comes out in the summer of '62. So the only comics that they have with the superheroes are Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and the Hulk. Even the Iron Man didn't start until Iron Man and Thor still have to start in Tales to Suspense and Journey into Mystery. And this is the family. Millie the Model, Patsy Walker, Kathy, Linda Carter, student nurse. So this is it.
Yeah. Once again, I think we just started hitting on this in last week's talk, where because once again, I started this a few weeks ago talking about the amazing coincidences that made Marvel even exist. That made how much of a long shot it was for Marvel to be so successful. Mm-hmm. And I think we when we were talking about the Atlas implosion, kind of at the end of it last week, we came up with the idea that one of the most important things that made Marvel exist was the Atlas implosion, because Marvel only being able to print 8 books a month meant that Martin Goodman couldn't do his usual flood the stands. Mm-hmm. That was his business model for 20 years. There's a trend, flood the stands. And the idea we also came up with was that since he only had 8 books and couldn't do that, he paid less attention to it. And Stan Lee was really left alone.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this ad. Now, Goodman used to do something and it went on until about 1952. If there was a similar character, it would appear as a backup in one of the other magazines. So they had Millie the Model it started in 45, so they had it in 1952, and maybe they would run Tessie the Typist story, and Tessie the Typist would run a Nellie the Nurse, and Nellie the Nurse would run a Patsy Walker. I'm not saying that it was the exact ones, but that was the deal. So they would have.
You'd have some overlap in titles, so you'd buy a Millie the Model comic and see a Tessie the Typist and backup, and then when you saw Tessie the Typist, you'd be familiar with it.
So it's not an actual crossover, but it was still within the same books. So if you read one, chances are you will read the other, and then go, "Oh, I like that character. Let me." It's a good idea.
Now, at that time, that was probably Goodman's idea.
Right.
But in 1962, with these annuals and with these characters, it was Stan's idea.
Right. Because Goodman probably wasn't paying that much attention. We already know the playing golf with Erwin Donefeld story is completely made up.
Yeah.
Erwin Donefeld shot that down.
Okay.
Said never happened. Never played golf with that man. Didn't even know him.
And people still repeat it.
Yeah, people still repeat it.
Yeah,
it's a good story.
It is a good story. But here's the thing: we already live in a medium that's about fantasy.
Yeah,
and then we tend to apply that simplistic framework to the industry news. Right. So we believe the stories. And that was one of the things that led me to argue with Horror Mike, is because we have so many urban legends in American comics, that are actually bullshit, but they still get repeated, and we have to stop.
Yeah,
because they don't lead us to an understanding of why things were done the way they were. They just so this happened because Stan had the idea for the Fantastic Four, and no, he didn't. But as long as it keeps getting repeated, people get into their heads. They don't do any actual investigation. They don't learn.
Right.
Tom Brevoort has done some nice blogs on investigation into Fantastic Four #1. I don't know if you ever read those. I generally find most of his blog, but his look at the Fantastic Four is good stuff. He's just trying to figure out. Because if you don't know, there's a lot of people who think Fantastic Four #1 was originally supposed to be in one of the monster comics, and were 2 or 3 stories. That was
I kind of go with that. They were supposed, at least they were created with that framework in mind.
Right.
Because the issue #1 has a 13-page story and a 12-page story. What's missing from the second story is splash page, and it's one of those Silver Age style splash pages. They kind of introduce the story but don't add any element to it. It's like a preview.
And and unfortunately, the original art to Fantastic Four #1 is in the wind. Nobody knows where it is, and there's no copies of it. So we can only examine old stats. And there's a bunch of people who do the same thing that Tom talks to and gives their input to what they can tell from the stats of Fantastic Four.
Although I think there's something that I can check right now. So let me check.
It's pretty interesting to think that, Fantastic Four #1 wasn't even its own supposed to be first issue. It was...
Right. I do recall hearing that about how, and when you look at it, it is, again, it seems like it's a safe monster book compared to starting to launch a new superhero series.
Right.
Although both stories have the same job number, V372.
Yes, it's a tough call. It's like they No one has any. They think a lot of it could maybe be answered if the original art ever shows up.
So,
But
but if they have they have the same story code, it appears in a printed edition of Fantastic Four #1.
Mhm.
So they were ordered at the same time to show up in the same comic. But the way that the stories are structured, what they probably didn't know is that they could make in a whole new #1 with a featured character.
Yeah, who knows? Like I
Yeah,
said, they
see, when
go
I
into it in real detail in Tom Brevoort's blog.
Mhm. And now I see the potential here for discussion in an alternate world where Fantastic Four #1 does not exist, and this was published in Tales of Suspense or something,
Yeah.
which would be nerds arguing about the fact that the two stories have the same job number, and arguing why did they, why were they supposed to come out in the same comic?
Fake legends ain't just regulated to comics. Lies travel real quick. They do.
Yeah, that's why we must always check the documentation.
Yeah. Always do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I know I don't know when things happened in the 90s.
right,
Sometimes I go, oh, that was 93. Oh, that was 90. Oh, that was 91.
Yeah, even the things that I remember watching, I do the same with car race with auto racing that I do with comics,
Right.
and I have to rearrange info. But even the stuff that I remember watching, I have to go and check, see what
Mhm.
somebody wrote.
And it's funny too. Once you learn some event and some date, it's tough to unlearn it. Because I've seen that when I talk to people too. It's like for some reason they've got it in their head that this happened in 1993 and it was really 1992. And when you show them the documentation that was 1992, it like blows their mind. They're like, "What? How
yeah,
can
trusting memory.
I've
It's
been
so
remembering
hard.
for 20 years that it was 1993."
I was trying to remember a
Exactly.
horror movie that I saw as a kid. I didn't like horror movies. It wasn't my thing. And I had watched one, and I only had bits and pieces of it, where it was the creature was trying to stop somebody, and he had gotten his arm cut off, and that led me to believe that there's a lot of trauma from that. That anytime I see an arm getting cut off in a movie or something, it just really disturbs me. I mean, the whole concept is disturbing anyway. But like I
Right.
remember watching Star Wars, and the first movie they cut off the guy's arm in the bar, and that always bothered me.
Ah,
Even up to Eternal Warrior had a cover that said warning, this is a disturbing cover, and you turn the page and there's an arm missing. I mean, there's only the arm shown there, and it's like that still freaks me out.
I
And
just
I
want
was able to trace it all the way back. Oh, Ant, I
to
was able to trace
Ant
it.
number 5, she gets her hand cut off.
Oh, okay. So because of that, I was able to trace back the whole thing was all the way to Nazis. It was
Ah.
all the way to this hand getting cut off in this horror movie because the hand kept moving afterwards.
Ah.
And I thought I knew exactly the scene. And then eventually I talked about it on one of my blogs, and it was like, "Oh, we know what movie it is." And through Facebook, people were able to find it and send me the movie. And I
Ah.
saw the clip, and it's like, "This is what I watched as a kid, but this is not what I remember."
Ah, yeah, because you in your
Because
mind, you
again,
built it up.
mine, and it's like because that particular movie gave me bad dreams.
Yeah.
So what I remember more was not the movie, but the scenes in the dream. And it's like, oh, this had basically merged into the one same scene, where it's like I clearly remember the hand moving, but everything around it was completely different. I thought it happened in a cabin, and it happened in somebody's kitchen. And it's like, no, it was a dark cabin and whatever. And it's like, no, it was a bright kitchen. So, yeah, so memory, you just can't go on memory. And again, being at Marvel as many years ago that we were, things get mushed into
Yeah.
it was all the same month that, Marvolution happened and the five editors and this and that, where it's like, no, there were so much gaps in between that
Yeah.
it's hard. And I could easily see how,
Yeah.
things get that way. And again, you hear so many stories, and I've heard tons of stories from people at Marvel, and
Right.
then you read books and stuff and magazines, and there's always these interviews, and it's like, yeah, everyone has a different viewpoint of the same event, and things don't line up all the time.
Well, it's not even that they have a different viewpoint. It's that time changes their viewpoint too. Like if
Right.
Comic Crack here says, "I don't know what happened to me a month ago," and the way I find there's like as I get older, there's like less events in my life. So, and that's we remember things by events and associations, and especially being
Yeah.
unmarried and having no children. Like I said, we remember things by first what grade we were in, then maybe what jobs we were had, then whether before marriage and after marriage, and then you remember things by your kid's age.
Right.
And then when your kids grow up, you kind of lose that memory. When your kid is 21, it's the same as if he's 24. There's not the same difference between 1 and 4. So it's
Right.
like we lose the associations as we get older too.
Yeah, there's a sketch in the Portuguese comedy show where they're. It's about a guy who's a meter maid for in Lisbon, and he's playing the most hateful man in the world against Hitler. and and the meter maid says, okay, so the game show host tells, can you think of something even more hateful than what Mr. Hitler did? Maybe. So this happened to me 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago because I hadn't gotten a haircut yet.
Association, yeah. Check out Patsy Walker 99, December 1961. That's a great early crossover.
Even before that, Millie the Model number 103 is the first one that features a crossover between the humor titles. Patsy Walker number 103. So this Patsy Walker and Millie the Model number 103. So this would be, I think, a July cover because it happened in April. And Patsy Walker guest stars in Millie the Model. Then a couple of months later, they have all of the characters guest starring in each other. There's a Patsy Walker story. There's Kathy appearing in Patsy Walker appearing in Millie the Model, and Millie appearing in Kathy, something like that, all in the same month.
And the fact that these books are in the hundreds, what issue you said? 10.
Yeah, Millie the Model 103.
103. So Million Models is going on for 103 issues before they even start crossing over characters. But the number itself is impressive that a comic book gets up to that number. And if that continued, they would be in the thousands by now.
Yeah. Or Marvel would just give them that number.
Well, now, but they could have actually reached it. But that's amazing in itself that it had reached that high of a number that, again, to get to that, it's like 25 years to get to 300?
Goblin says, time-wise,
is that how long that Todd took?
I can't figure out if anything from Marvel in the last 20 years that was new caught on. Like, it was just reboots and offshoots of the 60s and 90s stuff. Yeah, that's how good things gets made now.
Mm-hmm.
Why take a chance?
You're taking the art out of it, so they don't have superstar artists anymore because they don't want to promote artists. So no one's taking a chance with them.
We've had what it is too is we've had this discussion before, I think years ago. Let me see if I remember how it went. There's like a mathematical formula. If you want the next Wolverine or something, let's just say you want the next new hot character who's totally new. That means you have to churn out a lot of characters. Let's say in order to get the next Wolverine or somebody close to that, you have to create 25 characters to get one who catches on. There used to be new character creation, but nowadays people are more reluctant to create new characters for Marvel or DC because why give away your best characters? And corporate doesn't want you to because why are they? Let's just say you have to make 25 new comics over, let's say, a 4-year period. What is it? 6 comics a year. You have to give 6 new characters, 6 new comics each year in order to get one to catch on. That means 24 of them, or 23 of them, since my number is 24, are going to be failures. Why not just make another Batman or Spider-Man comic? And that's what they do. Why take a chance? Why, if you want the next Wolverine, you need 24 not Wolverines. And it's easier to just make 24 new Wolverines. So I think that's just what happened, especially now that comics are so corporate. And it kind of, I think all comic books are destined to be Captain Marvel and have a family. That's been the way it's been since Captain Marvel since they said, let's make Mary Marvel and Uncle Marvel and everybody Marvel. And they're all popular. And then Silver Age DC did the same thing. And then it took Marvel, since Marvel had a late start compared to DC, it took them a while to catch on and say, why not just create another Spider-Man, another Wolverine? And that's all they do now. Because you're never going to have the next Wolverine, but you've got 6 other Wolverines, and so that's good. So I think there's a lot of that. Comics just aren't, in Marvel and DC, new characters just aren't created anymore because there's no corporate reason to create new characters. Or at least the corporate reason is the financial incentive isn't there for anybody. To create Spider-Gwen, the financial incentive is there. To create, I don't know, Rock and Grass Lady, who has nothing to do with anybody else, there's no financial incentive there. I think that's what it comes down to. With when he said that, and I still remember there's a YouTuber, Masked Panther, who just changed his name again to some Sanctum Sanctorum. He's changed his name. He's a small YouTuber. I've been following him for like 8 years now or something. He puts out videos every now and then. He's a younger guy. I think he was in his early 20s when he started doing it. And one thing he always said has always stuck with me when he's like, how come my generation doesn't have anything of its own? Everything from my generation is retreads of the previous generation stuff. And I had never thought about that before. And I was like, I think he's right. Everything, if you're 20 years old right now, almost everything you have is a sequel from somebody else's generation. You don't have your own Wolverine, your own Spider-Man, your own Batman. You've got previous generation stuff. And I was like, that was an interesting thought. I had never thought of that before.
Something similar came to me, and I was thinking about this the other day when I was having a conversation with Jim Salicrop about his time at Marvel. He was the editor of the Spider-Man books, and I was having a conversation with him about Venom, which is, I have Spider-Man is my favorite character. It was the book that got me into really reading and getting into comics, and it was interesting to watch Venom be created because to me, in a weird way, Venom to me is still a new villain.
Right.
Because he did not exist before I was reading the books.
Yeah.
And he came in afterwards. It was like, that was really cool to get my own villain.
Right.
In that sense, where it's like, oh, okay, that's why I have a fondness for that character.
Right.
Because it was like, that was new. That's what I got reading. So Venom, Puma was new at the time as well, where it's like, oh yeah, those are kind of my villains.
Right.
Doc Ock was always there. Dr. Doom was always there, but it's like these newer ones. And then there's been a ton of villains since where it's like, oh, I don't know if I like these newer ones because I kind of got used to what I had gotten. And it's interesting. And I think I have that same fondness for like Web of Spider-Man, because that was the first time I was able to buy a first issue of a Spider-Man that was mine.
Yeah.
And it was a new title.
That's the reason I have a fondness for the Human Fly, even though it's not a very good comic book. I got the number 1 and bought it all the way through.
Yeah, I kind of got into Punisher because the Punisher did not have ongoing stories before
Yeah.
the Circle of Blood miniseries, and then when it was published here, I read it. I knew the Punisher existed because I knew he had appeared in Spider-Man and Daredevil stories. But then there's this new story. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know there were the black and white magazines, but there were no ongoing Punisher stories.
Yeah.
So this was it, and this was the first time, and so it was something new. It was new enough that I was interested in it. Here's the funny thing is that the first Marvel story that I've read is the first appearance of Vermin in Captain America. I had no idea it was the first appearance of Vermin.
Ah. And Mind the Comics here is commenting on our comment of people remembering things differently. Court decisions often distinguish the unachievable happened reality and the apprehended reality, which becomes legal reality. Yeah, they're trying to figure it out. That's what the judge just told Alex Jones. Just because you believe something is true doesn't make it true. That's what we're here to determine. That was a good. I don't know if you saw that it showed up on Twitter this week. It was a very good a very good explanation from the judge to Alex Jones that this wasn't his show. You don't get to define what's true. Just because you believe it's true doesn't make it true. Your belief has nothing to do with truth, she told him. I was like, and I need to know if I missed a new universe. You're missing a new universe right now. Let me show you.
You're missing Star Comics.
The Dead Lucky. Issue number 1, which is the 4th comic in the Massive universe, which is the Radiant Black was the first. Radiant Black, the Radiant Red miniseries. I just forgot the name of the third one. Rogue Sun, and now we get Dead Lucky, all taking place in the same superhero universe. This one left me a little cold. I liked the other 3. This one was kind of like, and I think it's just because I don't like medical dramas. I find nothing dramatic about being sick. To me, like all stories of someone being sick are the same. It just sucks. And hopefully you get cured or you don't. But she's got PTSD in this one, our superhero. And a lot of it was about her PTSD. And that's just my thing where I don't find that interesting. Because to me, every PTSD story is the same. You're dealing with PTSD. I mean, there's no one's got any special way to deal with PTSD. Everyone's got to deal with it on sort of in their own head way. So it was like that aspect of this, some decent art. I call this invincible style art because it's got that filled with color, thin lines, sort of cartoony realism. But I barely remember what happened in it. Some stuff went. It was a dull first. I'm going to buy a second issue. I'll give it one more issue and see. But the first issue really didn't grab me like the other stuff in the Massive verse did. Squirrel Girl is new. Punisher newness. Yeah. Ha, Alex Jones. What a fuckwit. That was a good. Yeah, that was really a good clip from the judge. I mean, I wish all of these people who lie in public had this judge, were in court and had this judge explain it to them that just because you believe it to be true doesn't make it true. Do you know anything about the Marvel horror comics or just superhero? It depends on what you mean by Marvel horror comics.
Yeah.
The stuff from the 70s, the
Yeah,
stuff from the 50s,
I
the
like
stuff from the 2010s.
giant monster stuff, but only because some of that was reprinted. I
actually have
never
a
really went back.
hardcover of Marvel Monster Comics. I don't know, 2007 or 8, when they put out a series that was half new stuff and half old stuff. So Eric Powell was drawing some monster comics for Marvel, and others. So they revived some of that stuff.
Was there a Fireside book with the monsters?
No, but there was
remember
one
a
in the
white
90s.
cover with like a white cover with like a castle on it. and then one of the monsters over it.
That came out in like 1990.
Okay.
There was a Marvel. I remember. I think I was at. I may have been very early days at Marvel, and I forget what it was called. It was like Monster. It may have been called Monster Masterworks,
Possibly.
and it had
Very
a
well
bunch
possible.
of the stuff from the 60s and the 50s, the Atlas stuff. I still have it here somewhere on my shelf. I don't know where it is.
And I want to say, was it Tower of Shadows that was the reprint book for Marvel stuff?
That was the early 70s.
Okay, so the first comics that start in late 69 and the early 70, they have new stories. They start having reprints around issue 4 or 5.
Okay.
And then after 7 or 8, they're all reprints.
I think I only got issues of that here there because it was a little before my time. But I think I got mostly reprints.
Yeah, if I end up finding like monster books in the dollar bins, I usually pick them up, but I don't have a full collection of the monster stuff.
I was looking at Marvel's A Nightmare. Marvel did a Nightmare on Elm Street one too.
Yes, they did it in the magazine size thing, and the legend is that Marvel got the license but did not really know what the character was about.
So they did that back in the 80s?
Yes.
About 1991.
It was magazine, a black and white magazine size.
Right. It was about the same. I think I'm not sure if they were trying to do magazines again because they also published a magazine-sized comic about Remo Williams, the Destroyer.
I have a vague memory of that. Yeah, I remember the Destroyer. Yeah. I have a vague memory of Nightmare on Elm Street. I've heard the Innovation ones. There's some stuff from like the aughts that's supposed to be good. Some of the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff and other stuff. I remember people liking that, but I never read too much of it.
Yeah, the Marvel ones, I think they try to make Freddy like a Tales of the Crypt kind of character, introducing horror stories. I don't recall them. I only remember seeing the artwork for one issue because we had the original art in the office, and so I remember that it was black and white, and it was a larger. Even the artwork was a larger size than the normal comic books.
Yeah, I don't know that Marvel's ever done any real good horror books. I'm trying to think.
No, they had some horrible books, but I don't know. I never really found comic books to be overly scary. Since horror wasn't my thing anyway, so I didn't really go looking. I did read horror books that I did find disturbing.
Yeah,
like there was a ghost boy in an attic, and I think it was a DC book. But I know that was like the only one that actually left me uneasy, but not really scared. As far as horror was concerned.
Yeah, they made 2 of them because many Karens thought it was too much for the kids, even though it's so. Yeah, I could see that happening. That they would do that stuff. In the 90s, Marvel even censored their 70s Savage Swords of Conan, which used to have nudity in them, and they drew tops on the women's that had nudity when they reprinted it in the 90s. So they were looking not to get into trouble. Wilson, did you pick up like the bootleg Monster Godzilla one off King Gira? It's my top comic for the year.
I have not seen that, though I do try to pick up any kaiju books that I can come across. But that one I have not seen.
And we never called them horror books in the 70s. They were always the mystery books. Because there was no horror to be found in them. And it's funny when I hear younger people calling, House of Mystery a horror book. I'm like, a horror book? That's we always called them, probably because of House of Mystery. We always referred to them as the mystery books, Marvel and DC, because there was no horror in them.
Yeah, there wasn't. It was just that was the supernatural stuff. Yeah. Maybe if we were lucky, if Constantine was around, then it just okay, that kind of made it.
Yeah, this is pre-Constantine.
Yeah, yeah, I don't even think I would even consider Tomb of Dracula horror. Because
that usually got called horror, but we took it with a grain of salt. It often said like Marvel's #1 horror book. And we were like, do they have any other horror books?
They have Frankenstein's monster. I
It
forget what
wasn't
title
really
that
horror.
ran under, unless it was just Frankenstein's monster. And wasn't there a mummy? Did Marvel have a
Oh,
mummy?
that's right.
The living mummy appeared in supernatural thrillers,
Yeah.
but they had Werewolf by Night.
And Werewolf by Night, and then even that
What's
I
his name? Soup.
considered superhero,
Yeah.
kind of thing, because he's like, the werewolf that wasn't he J. Jonah Jameson's son? Was he the
No,
No,
that's
werewolf
no, no.
by night?
Manwolf.
That's
So,
Manwolf. Okay, so I mixed
Mhm.
those
so I
two up
still
because I
have
didn't
the
read those books.
one of the things that did disturb me as a kid. I don't know if scared or horrified is too strong a word, but it made me go, oh, was the one Werewolf by Night book I had where he was fighting the hangman. And the hangman kept hanging him, or at least trying to hang him. So like Werewolf be going along, and all of a sudden he'd be being choked out by a noose. And that actually was like, whoa, that was a little too real for me as a kid. As it didn't horrify, but it stuck in my brain. It was like, whoa, that's different. That doesn't usually happen in these comic books. No one's getting choked out. I've been reading the DC versus Vampires, and it's been pretty decent so far. Also picked up Aliens #1 yesterday. Oh, I was like, so there was Marvel's been running an Alien series. I was like, for a minute I thought they rebooted it. Then I realized I guess they're doing an Alien and an Aliens series. Marvel. I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. From time to time, they were trying to drive a stake into the vampire's chest, so that would technically be called horror. But yes, for the most part, they were mystery. But we always labeled them. See, we as kids, we never called them horror. We always called them mystery books. I mean, maybe that was just around here, but we never referred to them as horror at all. The only reason I asked about Freddy comics was he's coming to town in 2 months. I'm gonna have him sign one. Oh, cool. Then it doesn't matter what's in them. Doesn't matter if they're good or bad. Whatever. It's just cool to have him sign them.
I think it's the Marvel ones because you could probably find them pretty cheap because they're not
Yeah,
popping up anywhere. So,
right.
but again, they were magazine size, so that
Yeah.
that tended to be a problem with storage and what have you.
And there's still no answer. Good evening, Saul. How are you doing tonight? That just popped in my head talking about the Marvel movie adaptations. There's still absolutely no one knows why Marvel Super Special, the Blade Runner one, was comic size.
Hmm.
All the other Marvel Super Specials were magazine size. And the Blade Runner one is because usually what they did was they'd make a magazine of it and they'd split it up into 2 or 3 comics and print those too. But the Blade Runner one was comic size. It's size of on magazine paper, glossy paper for the Blade Runner adaptation. Then they also printed a newsprint version of it. And I even asked Jim Salicrup, who was the editor, and he was like, no, just a few years ago, I asked him, I was like, do you have any memory of what? He's like, nope, I have no idea. We must have thought it would sell better. He's like, no clue. Because it's the only one that's shrunken. Weird. And some great Al Williamson art.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't tell you
And
why.
Steranko cover.
Yes, Duran. I'm great. This live stream makes my day. Glad to have you aboard. Spirits of Vengeance in the 90s creeped me out horror-wise. It was a bit as a preteen. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, some of that thing kind of was that modern version of urban gothic, but it was pretty much a crime book with the.
What if you were a preteen? Might creep you
Yeah,
out.
I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah, I was an adult, so to me that was 90s. Everything was on fire. All those covers were always they were.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it's Ghost Riders and Spirits of Vengeance, so
And
I remember fire, a lot of fire.
Yeah, when Ghost Rider came out here, I was 14, so
Yeah. Ghost Rider. Yeah, I read some Ghost Rider when I was a kid. The one issue when I was a kid, the one issue of Ghost Rider that everybody liked was the Jim Starlin one, where he raced death. It was a well done issue.
I only ever read the newer ones. Like I remember finding the first issue, in the subway. That was the only place I was able to find it because it sold out everywhere else. And I happened to be on my way to happened to be on my way on a weekend to go visit some friends, and it was like I happened to run into a newsstand. I think in Queens. No, it was in Manhattan because I was transferring trains. It was in Manhattan, and this one newsstand had copies of Ghost Rider #1.
Ah, that the who did that? Mark Teixeira inked it, and
Texiera did the cover.
Javier Saltaris.
I think this was all Mark in that first issue.
No, I think Javier was the original penciler.
Was the original
on Ghost
penciler?
Rider.
Okay, then
No,
Mark's
no.
inking
him.
it.
No, Saltaris was the inker, and then it started penciling. But the first issues are all text.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize
They're
that.
text.
I didn't think Tex took over till a little while later.
No, I think Tex was there from the beginning. I think he was even coloring it himself.
Okay.
Yeah, because even the Brazilians did their own coloring. The Brazilians did their own coloring, but they tried to stick to the originals if possible. And Ghost Rider had a very different color palette, and it was different from anything else.
Tex used to be in the office a lot those times, and Javier was in there a bit too. So I have a memory of Tex wanting to pencil himself rather than inking Javier on Ghost Rider. So that's probably why I think.
Right, because I think it was down to speed. Because I know I was inking pages of Ghost Rider whenever Tex was there. And it was like, it would be there after work. It's like, you doing anything right now? I was like, no, here, fill in these blacks.
And then Spirits of Vengeance starts, and I'm having Andy Kubert interspersed in between in between Ghost Rider because of the Midnight Suns crossover.
I wish I knew which issue it was, but there was an issue of Ghost Rider. First of all, Tex's working method on Ghost Rider was insane. This is when he was penciling and inking. What he would do was, the first week he'd do almost nothing because he was so exhausted from the last issue. The second week he'd start penciling, mostly layouts he'd be doing. The third week he'd be like, oh my goodness, I haven't got enough done and half the time is gone. So he'd start penciling and inking more. And the fourth week he'd just be up for days finishing it. Because the deadline was looming, he had to get 2 weeks worth of work done in 1 week, which led to the first week of the next month where he was too exhausted to get anything done. So he used to be in the office all the time when he was working, especially that last week. He'd be there the last 2 weeks a lot, but especially that last week, he'd be in the office work. For whatever reason, he liked to hang out and work and get people like Wilson to help him after hours. And I remember one time we weren't helping him. We were making fun of him for some reason. I can't even remember what it was. Probably because he was in his last week and we were, you going to make that deadline, Tex? I don't know. We were just in the bullpen ribbing him, and he was drawing a graveyard scene. So he started when we'd make fun of him, he'd put our names on the grave. And I say, ha, I killed you. Ha ha, you're dead. So somewhere in some Ghost Rider book is a graveyard scene, and Osborn is on one of the graves where he killed me.
Nice.
And Saga of the Swamp Thing. That was a creepy book when Alan Moore got on it. Was there a Marvel... What if I came across that asked, what if the Marvel bullpen became... Oh, yeah, that was issue 5 of What If, was it? What if the original
it was
Marvel
early,
bullpen... 5 or 6, I have it in the back. What if the original Marvel bullpen became the Fantastic Four? So they had Stan Lee as Mr. Fantastic, Saul Brodsky as the Human Torch, Jack Kirby as the Thing, and Flo Steinberg as the Invisible Woman. Yeah, that does exist. What if the original Marvel bullpen became the Fantastic Four is the name of it. I can't remember. I think it's 5, but I could be wrong. What has to be a good story that has come out in the last few years to pick up? See, I'm an indie guy. So I don't know the Marvel and DC storylines at all. So I've got no advice for you. But I always say pick up Usagi Yojimbo. That's always good. I show off all the comics I get every week on this channel here. So most of the stuff I like that I get, but like mainstream Marvel and DC superhero stories, I don't get to read that much of because it's just not my thing.
Yeah, I enjoy the Ronin from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Story miniseries. That I enjoyed, but I read that as a trade paperback. I'm still picking up Amazing Spider-Man because that relaunched fairly recently, and I'm enjoying. I think just the nostalgia of John Romita Jr. being on Spider-Man. The story so far is a mob story, and it's in the middle of it, so I haven't even got to the third or fourth issue of what's going on. But other than that, I don't know what's going on in DC, so there's nothing I could recommend for that. But
Yeah, there's a person in my comic shop who also started picking up the Spider-Man with the relaunch. He also is in. It was John Romita who drew him back to it. So I mean, not John Romita. Who's drawing it? Yeah, Junior, John Romita Jr. So
mhm.
I know. What have I heard? I'll have to ask my friend Rob. I'll have some stories for you. Like my friend Rob, who I haven't seen in a little while. I might see him tomorrow. He buys a lot. He's who I usually get my mainstream comic stories information from. But since COVID, I haven't got to see him that much because we used to go and hang out at the comic shop every week. But he's immunocompromised, so he hasn't really been hanging out at the comic shop.
Right.
So we'll have to see. I'll have to check. So I'm kind of out of the, but like he's the always. I'd always check with him. I'd be like, oh, what's good? He's I like this one. I like this one. So that's how I'd get my information on what was good at Marvel and DC. I'll have to ask him.
But he asked for good story, so I
Yeah.
know you've been really enjoying the one with the genies.
Oh yeah, 8 billion genies. That one's been good. That's an 8 issue mini. That one's been fun. What else have I picked? There's stuff I always pick up. Terry Moore is about to come out with the Parker Girls. I think that's out next month. He's a guy I always pick up all his stuff. He did Strangers in Paradise way back when in the 90s. His last he's done Echo was one of it. He's always doing stuff. He's one of these, auteur comic guys where I see something by Terry Moore, I automatically pick it up. And he's just coming out with one. So see if your shop is getting the Parker Girls out. That's a good one to jump on. Otherwise, just get any of his old stuff. Look up Terry Moore. I like all his stuff. Good stuff. Always hated Brazilian Ghost Rider colors. Red skull and green suit. Does Tex still do anything? Union at Image and the Sabretooth series was when I left his stuff. I think he's done stuff in the last few years, but I don't remember what.
I
remember
saw his
seeing him.
name. I saw his name on something announced. I don't know if he posted up something, but he's always working, so I'm sure he's working on something. But
Right.
off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Tit Goblin says The Closet is good and Slumber is good. I liked Slumber. That one, I think I bought that one, right? That was the one about the serial killers teaming up against the cult. Was that one? That was a pretty good one from Image. The Closet, I only read the first issue of, and it was okay, but I didn't get any more. But it's only 3 issues, it turns out. So
yeah, that recoloring with the red skull, with a red skull and a green suit was for Johnny Blaze for the 1970s stories.
Good evening, Sleepy.
Because then Catch was a lot closer to the source material.
Another good story that I liked is Mind Management. Came out about 5 or 6 years ago. I really liked the Matt Kint Mind Management. Now we've got Mind Management Bootleg with Matt Kinzierski drawing it. Matt Lesniewski drawing it. Lesniewski. And I have to say that this issue looked a lot better than the last one. Sleepy just came here, and both of us were complaining last issue. It had to do with either the printing or the coloring, but it was hard to see the black line. The black line was getting lost. I don't know if it wasn't underprinted but this issue looks much, much better. There's no the art getting and this guy's just this weird psychedelic artist. I was a little disappointed in the actual story because the first Mind Management was one of my favorite. It was just kind of about, and it lasted 30 issues or so. And there's this story of this woman. It takes place in a world where people get superpowers, but they're used in really creative ways, and they're like spies, kind of. And Mind Management was one of these groups that ran these superpowered spies. They're not like superheroes at all. And it was really clever, and there's very interesting use of the powers, and it had the plot. It was a spy plot where Maru was trying to figure out what was going on. What was Mind Management betray? Is Mind Management good or bad? Did they betray? Blah blah blah. And it ended up with her blowing the whole thing up. So now this one is kind of about a new group of characters who are getting Mind Management back together, I think. Or someone has already gotten Mind Management back together, maybe, and they're trying to go against them. It seems to be covering the same ground, and it hasn't been as interesting so far. But I like the art. And Matt Kindt just does such interesting things with the format, too. Because most of it is comic. And then they give you what purports to be the script of the issue, but it's actually the script to a whole other comic that hasn't been drawn. So you get a whole new story in this script. And then they give you, in the back, I think this is supposed to be a mini comic that exists within the Mind Management world. So he really gives you a lot for your single issue. He rewards the single issue reader.
I don't know. It feels like homework.
Oh no, it's fun.
Is it fun? Okay, because
really
I'm getting Watchmen vibes. Where it was like so much
I
stuff.
never read when they put a script in the back of the comic that's to the comic. I never read it. I'm always like, why do I want to read a script to a comic that I just read? I've just never read one. But this one is actually fun. And sometimes he's like, and sometimes he just gives him impossible things to draw. And it's a joke within the story. Oh, and draw 1,000 characters all with cat heads or something like that. Just like, but it's actually I enjoy this part, I must say, which I never expected, just because he does a good job writing it. And these mini comics are cool too. So I really, the printing of this issue made it so much better than the last issue. Yeah, she said, this issue looked good on the paper, exactly. Will he be playing Burn It, Slab It, or Read It tonight? I actually forgot what you call it. I think I have one ready still. Let me see. I haven't done one in a few weeks, but Read It, Slab It, Rip It. Was it? Yeah, Read It, Slab It. No. Read It, Slab It, Rip It. RSR. Was that what it is?
I think that's what it is.
Let me see what I got here.
And that meeting was canceled, so we don't have to worry about me leaving.
All right. Let's see. What do I have still in the pipeline? Come on. Oh, let's go with 1989 Mainstream September.
Ooh, 1989.
1989, yeah. Great colors. I agree the story in this issue wasn't very convincing. Yeah. The extras in Mind Management are like a game. It's a lot of fun. He actually made a game out of Mind Management, too. There is a Mind Management game. Let me share my screen. Window. There we go. There we go. We've got Sandman number 10, Uncanny X-Men 255, and Blueberry number 2. That is a
What a
wide
selection.
variety of stuff. That is a wide variety of mainstream comics. We got mainstream France, mainstream Marvel, and mainstream DC, but sort of in,
British
Vertigo.
mainstream DC. And I'm almost sure I own 2 of the 3.
I'm still not over the dolphin. Read it. And which cover would you put a dolphin on?
Oh, you put a dolphin on all the covers. I think that is our now purple ape of the 70s.
Slab Sandman, Reed Blueberry, and eat the X-Men. He's not going to rip it. He's going to eat it. Ooh.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to slab Sandman and read Blueberry and rip X-Men. That X-Men is from the Fall of the Mutant storyline, which is when X-Men
victory.
It's when X-Men starts to suck. They ship them off to Australia.
Are there any slabbed graphic novels? Do they slab magazines, right? So that's magazine size.
I don't know. I have not seen.
Someone must have slabbed that New Mutants #1 graphic novel. If anything exists in a slab, it must be, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely read Blueberry.
I think we're all going to read Blueberry.
I think we're all going to read Blueberry, but I would slab Sandman.
Oh, there we go. The dolphin goes well with X-Men. Mystique can hold the dolphin. Look at that.
Yeah, that would be good. And then rip up the X-Men.
Read Blueberry 2, slab X-Men to sell, and rip Sandman.
I don't know. I think as far as investment purposes are, I think Sandman would bring in more money than the X-Men.
I don't know.
It's
hard a new TV show.
Period. Yeah. And if if they went to Australia, and if that's the first issue with what was the name of the Australian character that they used to teleport with?
Gateway.
If that's the first appearance of Gateway, then it's a what's that? Forever Key is the new term.
Forever Key, yeah, first appearance of Gateway.
I'm not sure that.
I don't know if it's in that issue. It's just that was a time period.
But I'm not sure if Gateway counts as a Forever Key.
I think that's what makes it funny. Slab Blueberry, rip Sandman, and slab
X-Men.
He's slapping. I think you got to read one of them, Sleepy. I keep writing it wrong.
That's fine as long as we're having fun. But
slab
Blueberry,
Sandman, read Blueberry, shred X-Men, shred it with passion. First time I read them all. I passed up on that Blueberry for a few bucks a year ago. I'm regretting. I don't blame you. As we've discussed on here, those don't come up that often. Both Sleepy Reader and Comic Crack have discussed that because they've been looking for them. And once those goes into someone's collection, they don't come out. Those Marvel graphic novel Mobiuses. Someone has to die for those to come out. You know what? Everybody reading Blueberry has made me want to not read it, but I have it too. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm going to read Blueberry, slab X-Men, and rip up the Sandman. But I can't. Who drew that issue of Sandman? Who drew the?
I have no. It says on the cover, Dringenberg.
Oh, okay. Sleepy found Blueberry hardbacks. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. You know that Blueberry cover was made for the Epic Comics edition. Want to see what the original cover looks like?
Sure. Stop sharing.
I once held the original Mobius artwork.
Ah.
It was this big. It was for the Akira tribute.
Ah, that's the original one?
Yep.
Lieutenant Blue, very purple and
it's the same characters, but they're not doing the same thing.
They're just sitting there, riding their horses. That cover says Western, and that's all it says.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, sun's going down or coming
The,
up.
the Marvel cover says, let's let's try to make them think this isn't a Western.
Let's show the action of the Western.
Yeah.
Let me check if the covers to the new printings are similar. Okay, voilà pour un circuit.
I did a video on those, taking a look at those blueberries once. The
Oh, yeah?
ones that are on my the ones that are on my shelf, which I got when I was at Marvel, just from Marvel. You know, I was one of I didn't take a lot of comics home from Marvel, but I took home those Mobiuses when I found them.
Okay, so new editions of that specific Blueberry Adventure have a recolored cover, more orange in there, but it's the same cover.
Oh, and I saw in Comic Shop News, I saw this one was coming out. These are comics I got about a month ago. What is it called? But that are what's the artist's name? Joseph Schmalke. There were those 2 #1 issues that were really weird and had like the toy website tie-in. Remember those? I forget the name of them. From the pages of Phantom Star Killer. That was it. Is all of Blueberry in print for you, Paolo?
I can't remember. I can't remember if there was a recent Blueberry collection, but I don't think all of the stories are in print.
No,
Did
I
Wilson
did.
rip the original Mobius drawing?
No. I was saying that I held it. I am not. I was not ripping art.
I've got a Mobius print that let's see. I think Marie Javins was the editor on that Mobius stuff. So she knew Mobius's agent. And Mobius sent in a bunch of prints, or his agent did, to Marvel to pass out. So Marie was always good. Whenever Marie got something, she'd always go into the bullpen and see who wanted it. Sometimes when something went into other editors' offices, it never came out. You know, all the editors got it. Or Marie, being that I think she was the Epic editor at the time.
He was epic. Yeah.
She always came out in the bullpen because she knew we were the ones who appreciated the art. So I think I got a copy from her of a Mobius print that I still have.
I've only ever held it. I never. I did not
Right.
rip it. I returned it back.
Oh, I don't really read Mobius. It's more like looking at the art. Oh, yeah.
But Blueberry is not a Mobius comic. It's the art style, especially going back to the 60s and 70s, is completely different from the stuff that you would know from the Dana and Arzek stuff, and the Blueberry is, for all intents and purposes, a Charlier comic. So it was started by the writer, and Jean Giraud was recommended to him by a different writer who also did a Western, and for whom Jean Giraud had interned earlier before.
So Texier did a run on Penthouse Comics in the 90s and recently put out AWO called Nighthead. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that existed. Huh. You can find all Mobius Blueberry for about €3 each in Portugal. Oh.
Yeah, not surprised. They were still soft covers. They were graphic novel size, but they were soft covers.
What was the greatest art that passed through your hands, Wilson?
Oh, that's hard to tell. It's not one because, being there, I've held artwork from every decade. So, from Golden Age to Silver Age to Modern Age.
I'd say when Alex Jones is Alex Ross is Alex Jones is Marvels. When Alex Ross's Marvels first came through the bullpen, that made a big stir.
Yeah,
I remember that. I don't know if were you there for that, or was that before you?
I was on the 9th floor during the Marvels run. So
they were in the stat room for some reason. They didn't come through the bullpen because they were fully painted and there was nothing to paste down on them. So they went through the stat room for some reason. I don't know why he had to make black and white stats of the art, maybe for letter. I don't know. But every
That black and whites were used in on the paste up mechanicals.
yeah, must have been.
Yeah, because I remember holding. Actually, I think I have a cover from one of the paste up mechanicals for the fourth issue.
The
That I,
covers may have come. I don't remember any of the issues
into
themselves coming through the bullpen,
Yeah,
but I remember them in the stat room.
I remember seeing black and white art for it
Okay,
on
stats of
me-
it. No,
mechanicals for it. So
right.
I'm wondering if they must have did a whole set of mechanicals for it for some reason. Uh,
Mm.
but I don't know if I could pick just one of the greatest because I've held so many of the artwork. Maybe the probably the Alex Ross were the most expensive.
Yeah.
Um, but great to me. I held the Ramita stuff.
Oh yeah.
John Romita Senior original Spider-Man artwork. That that basically came by us when we were at a convention. John had called me over, and it was a cover to one of the original Spider-Man runs. And he was like, "Oh, Wilson, you got to see this." So I got to hold that, and John and I just talked about it. And it was funny because John turned around, and was like, "Yeah, this is one of the covers that was stolen from Marvel." And the guy who had his face just dropped. And it's like, "Oh, don't worry about it, kid. It was just this is long ago, and it has nothing to do with you." And the guy wasn't even sure what to do with it, and he signed it. He was happy to sign it, but he just wanted to show it to me because
did
again,
you did,
it was something neat to
did
show.
you get to go to John Romita's show at the Society of Illustrators a few years ago?
Yes, I did.
They had a lot of his nice art there.
Yeah, they had a ton of great stuff there. So I got to go
Mhm.
there. I got the book that they had, and I took a bunch of pictures. I know I put them all up on Facebook,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I've held Kirby stuff, but just inked. I don't think I've actually held like a full Jack Kirby in his Jack Kirby heyday stuff. I think I
Ah.
held like romance stuff from him, but I don't know if there's like one greatest piece that was like, oh, I don't know if I should be holding it kind of a thing um, from that time period.
Yeah, so much stuff went through our
But
hands.
that's the thing. That so many things go by, and it's amazing to see how much money these things are going for. Where it's
Hmm.
like I'm looking at the art, it's like that's amazing. It's going for that price. Sheesh, that's crazy. I think I spilled soda on that one. So again, it's like there's a whole. All the covers were kept separate from the other comics. Um, because of the file system they had to go through. And I once knocked a can of soda right into that drawer that had the
Oh,
covers. Oh, I moved so quickly where it was like grabbing it. You can't, again, you do it quick enough, you could dot everything dry and whatnot. But
yeah.
it was like, oh my God, this is how I'm going to lose my job. So, and from then, never drank soda uh, out of a can. It was always in a heavy, big ass Marvel mug, just so I don't knock anything over.
Do you remember when original painted art got thrown out from Johnny Green's office?
I heard about it, but I don't recall what exactly happened because
Well,
I
first,
don't remember it being Johnny Green's
it
office.
was Johnny Green. It was his. It was when he was Dan's assistant, 387 still. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but here's what I find amazing. During the good years at Marvel, I think this was during the bankruptcy years, because Marvel had the building had cleaners who'd come in every night. Now, in the early 90s, were there, you couldn't throw, if you threw a piece of art in the garbage that you wanted to throw away, you'd find it on your desk in the morning because the cleaners didn't want to throw anything art away. And I just always marveled at that's how conscientious they were. They saw a piece of art in the garbage, they'd pick it up and put it on your desk because clearly a piece of art shouldn't be on the garbage.
Right.
So Johnny had a book and it was fully painted art. I don't remember what book it was. It was some special project. And all they could figure out was it was on his desk, and somehow it fell off his desk into the garbage can because he came back the next morning and the artwork wasn't there, and they were freaking out. They were trying to figure out what happened to the artwork, and they eventually tracked down the guy who cleaned it. He's like, "Yeah, I threw that out." 30 pages of art, painted art. He threw it, and it was, and then of course it was this big to do because they had to pay the artist for his original art too,
Right.
and get it all redone. So it was a big kerfuffle. But my whole thought the whole time was, who are they hiring that they threw out the art? Because they should. It made me see they cheaped out on hiring cleaners because the old cleaners would have never done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I would bet it's because they cheaped out like they
Yep.
did during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like because everything changed. Yeah, everything became cheaper. You know when a company is going bad when the toilet paper changes
Yeah.
overnight. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, we went from something that was normal to sandpaper. They're nickel and diming it. You got people saying that they're removing paper clips from, the from anything that gets thrown away. Paper, they're going to the garbage, removing the paper clips, can't throw that out. And, things that used to be free, like the soda and whatnot, all of a sudden disappear.
Yeah.
You know?
Because I can remember in the early 90s trying to throw things out and going, not original art, just something that may have looked like original art.
Right.
And you're going, oh, I guess I'm throwing this out at home. And I'd put it in my bag and throw it out. Like, I can't throw it out here. But that's what amazed me about it. I was like, wow, whoever their cleaners they were using weren't good. But here's this comic I was showing you. It's another one in the Phantom Star Killer series. Peter Gorel and Joseph Schmalke. Vice Admiral Acre. I guess it's supposed to remind you of Vice Admiral Akbar some way, at least the name. But I'll be getting that. It's just they're just telling their stories in one shots with different characters. Knuckle Duster, that was the second one. And it was like John, my comic shop guy, the way I read it, he was like, who's like a mainstream fan. He's like Marvel DC guy. So for him to get an indie book is weird. So he was like, you just got to get these. So I ended up getting them, 2 of them. Now I'm going to get a 3rd. What's Paolo digging out for us?
So I started buying these finally.
Oh, Once in Future. I just found out I got the latest issue, number 28, and someone on my list on my video said it's ending at issue 30. Anyway,
so
go on.
It'll be 5. Yeah, this is very exciting. A very exciting read. I mean, it really pulls you in.
Stuff. I enjoy. And my friend, my comment on it was, I was talking about how, wow, I actually have something in issue 28. I was like, when a book, it's like I've started taking it for granted, and that's so rare these days that if something goes up, it's like, and I was like, I wonder how many issues it takes for me to start taking it something for, and I think that's why people stop buying long-running series. They start taking it for granted, and it's no longer exciting because it's not the new book. And I'm like, I still like it, I still enjoy it. I'm not dropping it, but I think I'm starting to take it for granted. And now, as soon as I said that this week, I found out there's only 2 issues left.
Yeah, but nice collection. 5 trades.
Yeah. Really well drawn, well colored. I'm enjoying the story. And the story took a turn like halfway through where, like I said, the issue you're reading now, it's all about the first volume.
Yeah, I have the first 2 volumes, so I get up to issue 12.
Okay. So that's all about them trying to stop the fairyland from mixing with a little bit of a spoiler, like somewhere around there. They don't stop it. So now the rest of the series has been, which I didn't expect. I expected them to be able to stop it. Then the rest of the series, it becomes even more fast paced. See that Sleepy is relieved it's ending because he's also starting to take it for granted. The rest of the series is even more fast paced, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
With them running around in this crazy fairy world that's half wrong, trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, but you kind of get surprised by it because you're really not expecting Beowulf to show up.
Yeah.
And then they kill Beowulf. Okay, we're done now. But then Grendel shows up.
But there's plenty.
And they kill Grendel, so Grendel's mother shows up.
Yeah, and it's like there's plenty. And since every story is different, there's plenty of there's half a dozen King Arthurs. So it's like Beowulf could show up again, but a different Beowulf. You never know.
And I also bought this.
What do you got there?
French Tarzan comics.
Oh, let's see. Let's give him a solo layout. French Tarzan comics. Seigneur of the Jungle.
Seigneur de la Jungle. And this is written by Christophe Beck. I think you were talking about it some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the artist by Stefan Subic, and it's actually pretty fun read because in the first pages there's virtually no text.
Oh wow!
Because it's when Tarzan's still living with the apes, so he doesn't speak, and there are the occasional captions, like in this page over here.
Cover. Let's see that. Let's go back to solo.
8 years later. But the rest, most of the pages are nothing, until finally the Jane's father's expedition shows up, and that's when they start getting real talkative.
Oh wow! Look at that.
And so I'm reading this one right now, and I also bought the second one, which is Tarzan at the Earth's core.
Oh, Tarzan at the Earth's core. Is that a Pellucidar crossover?
It should be maybe the first appearance of Pellucidar, because these are direct adaptations of the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels because they're in the public domain now.
It's funny that the one Edgar Rice Burroughs Pellucidar novel I read many years, I think I was in high school or college, was one called Tanar of Pellucidar. And I think I had a coverless version of it where I didn't realize it was Burroughs until I was reading it a bit. And then the one thing that stuck with me all these years later is how they traveled through the jungle and how Tanar traveled through the jungle in Pellucidar. He ran across the branches. The forest or jungle, I can't remember if it was forest or jungle, was so close together with trees, he would run through the treetops. Not even swing from vine to, just run. He'd jump from treetop to treetop. Okay.
One way to travel, I guess.
Yeah, this one as a different art style, kind of looks like Kubert in places. The artist on this one is Spanish, and so
Sleepy says he thinks Tarzan came in the middle of the Pellucidar series. Let's get Solo. Hold on a second. Let's see a little of that. There we go.
So as you can see here, kind of looks like.
Oh yeah, you keep freezing up on Solo. It's weird. But not on Small. Those are both very nice.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully this will get translated into English, and you can have some nice Tarzan stories.
Yeah. I think the name Tarzan still isn't in the public domain here too, like Conan.
Yeah. So it's going to be like the Cimmerian. They're probably going to have to call it Lord of the Jungle or something.
Yep. Another comic back this week. This is it's up to issue 15. So, Sleepy's getting FOMO. No, I don't think it's fun. It's what is it called when you can't have something? There's another word I can't think of. Sour grapes is when you can't have something and you say, that's bad anyway. Those grapes are sour. But there's one where you can't get it. It's out of reach. Yeah, we'll probably get Shrunken Ablaze versions. Time Before Time, issue 15, which again, I should start taking this one for granted soon, but it's on issue 15. But they got a new artist for this one who's pretty good. What's his name? Eric Zawadski, Zawadski. And the regular guy was the guy who's been on it, who did a few of the story arcs, reminded me of more of Mike Mignola. This guy's got a more illustrative style. But some nice little cityscape there in the future. But yeah, no, this has been a solid series. They've mixed up the story a lot. This is the one that's about two crime syndicates that run time travel, and they're both in different times. And our two lead characters were a guy who was running the time machine, but he was caught up with one of the syndicates. It was like, if you're running the time machine, it's not a good job. It's like indentured servitude. You owe the syndicate money and you're working it off. And they're not shielded that well, so you could die from radiation if you do it too much. So he was looking for a way to escape. And just as he was looking for a way to escape, this woman who's an FBI agent kidnapped him, grabbed the time machine so she could go back in time and find her family. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of different people. Every other story arc, or after like two story arcs, maybe you'll get a 1-issue or a 2-issue story arc about one of the other characters. So that they've been kind of making the world kind of really rich, and I've liked all the little story arcs too. So I've really, really enjoyed, and it had one of the best. Matter of fact, the first issue was better than like the second issue. But it's really picked up. They've done a good job with this one. I've enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Or at least I should say, it's gotten better. Unlike a lot of stories, I think it's gotten better as the series has gone on. So it's good stuff.
Cool.
Time Before Time. No, I got Time After Time going through my head. Oh, guess which comic didn't come into my comic shop this week? Someone pointed out in my video. The Great Gatsby, issue 5.
Oh.
This came out this week, and I'll probably get it next week now. But I don't know what's going on with the Diamond delivering to my comic shop. That comics are missing from week to week. Because someone commented in my video, you didn't get Gatsby number 5 this week? And I was like, what the? I didn't even know it was coming out. Oh, that's right. I also, where is it? Oh, that's the one I talked about. I talked about the first issue I got, which was only That was the only thing I picked up off the shelf. Let's see if we got another Reed, Rip, and Slab. Ooh, here's a little October 1988 Indies. I don't think we did this one. October 1988 Indie Comics. Evangeline, number 12. Dragon Force, number 5. And Phase, number 2.
I may have had Phase.
I don't think I had any of these.
Who published Dragon Force?
Aircell, I think that is.
Right. That's early Dale Keown, right?
Yeah, I think that's early Dale Keown. That's a Paul Galassi cover on Phase. Oh, and Raphael Cannon is drawing Phase too. I know he went on to do other stuff. I remember that name. Oh, Jim Ballant is drawing Evangeline with Chuck Dixon writing it. Jim Ballant of Catwoman, and does he do Tarot, Witch of the Black Rose? Is that his?
I believe that is his. I think that's his creator-owned.
Yeah, that's been out for like 150 issues.
Yeah. I was buying First Comics and I was buying Eclipse.
No, you don't get to rip them all. Sorry, that's not the game. Aren't you the least bit curious? I mean, come on.
Oh,
You-
I'll tell you, I'm
Survival.
very curious because I would have
You
bought
have
them
to
all
spend.
just based on the covers.
You have to
can't
spend the
buy-
money and send one of them to.
To CGC.
Well, for
Yeah.
me, Dragon Force is definitely getting slabbed because I like that cover better. But that one's got a Galassi cover, but I think I like the Dragon Force cover better. And it's got dragon in the logo.
Mhm.
So I think I'm slabbing Dragon Force.
I'm definitely reading Phase.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna rip Dragon Force. I'm pretty sure there's got to be better Dale Keown art in there than that one. So I'm gonna rip Dragon Force. I'm going to slab Phase and read Evangeline.
Mine, the comics, is slabbing Phase, ripping Evangeline, and ripping reading Evangeline and ripping Dragon Force.
I would slab. I think Evangeline. I would slab.
Oh, he's slabbing Evangeline.
Yeah.
We need the access to, what is that called? The CGC census?
Uh huh.
To see if there's any issue of any of these slabbed.
Make the
The
dolphin
rip
ride the
Dragon
bike.
Force,
Yes.
Yeah. Take the dolphin ride the bike.
I don't know. I think I would like the dolphin with the guns.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm slabbing Dragon Force, reading Phase, and ripping Evangeline. Did I have any issues of Evangeline? The title sounds familiar.
The title
but
looks so familiar.
You're thinking Liefeld's Evangeline.
maybe burn Dragon Force, skim Phase, and tip Evangeline in molten plastic.
Well, technically,
No.
they do.
I can't believe how little love there is for 1988 October indie comics.
And come on,
I
if
would have bought them all.
if it's
If
first
I'd
in Eclipse,
seen them, I'm almost sure I would.
I know I bought some issues of Dragon Force. Yes, we knew you meant plastic, Sleep. See,
Yeah, for me, these were the indies that I would have picked up.
make
at that
tender
time.
passionate love to Dragon Force. The other two as side pieces.
yes, AFPC. But what would you do about the dolphin on Aquaman French comic? You weren't here. You weren't here the other week, so to see the dolphin on the French Aquaman.
Who and how do you come up with the titles? Do you pick them at random really fast, or do you have a big file of them? What it usually is I go to Mike's Newsstand, right? Is that the name of it?
Mike's Amazing World.
Mike's Amazing World. There's a website, Mike's Amazing World, where you can look up any year and month, and he'll tell you and you can see what comic was on sale that month. So you could look up, I could look up, October 1988. And it gives me all the comics. So I just kind of pick a month and a year and then try to come up with a theme. And this theme was 1988 October Indies. What do you think the blowhole's for?
I'll tell you what it's not for and why I'm not allowed in SeaWorld.
Because I picked up a few of the early Air Cell ones, but then they kind of dropped out of sight for me. Like Elf Lord, I think, was Air Cell. That was decent. But then there was a couple of others, and they kind of faded away, and then they came back. There's something weird that went on with them. Was it Barry Blair? Was he the Air Cell guy?
Yep. He basically wanted every comic to be soft porn.
Yeah. This has reminded me a little of Howard Chaykin, American Flag, going on with the American flag in the background and all the leather and motorcycles. Blair, yeah, air cell supremacy.
In case anyone does not understand what are we talking about with dolphins? The cover to Aquaman #1 French edition.
Where they replaced Mira with a dolphin.
Uh-huh. Because they weren't married yet, and he couldn't be holding a girl.
So that's our running joke now. Replacing. I wonder if that's still in there.
I tell you what, Eclipse, they had me because a bunch of books coming out for 50 cents, while everything else was $1.25 or 75 cents. It was like I was getting all those books for a short while.
There you go. I still have them, two of them side by side in my browser.
No, this is French. This is from Arrêt d'Artima.
Yeah, this was I had this Aquaman cover in one of the Rip Read and slabs a couple weeks ago, and Paolo informed us of the French version. So now we want to replace one of the figures with the dolphin. Was sailing back from excavation one year, and the school of dolphins followed the boat. I commented to the skipper how beautiful they are, and he said they also scream like humans when you shoot them.
Oh my gosh.
Great. Stunning color treatment, though. Yeah, nice cover. That's his name just flew out of my head. Who's the cover artist? The DC Aquaman, Nick Cardy. Whew. He did that. I wonder who colored covers for DC in the 60s. Was that Jack Adler?
I do not
I think
know.
so.
I couldn't tell you who colored or lettered those books. I was more of a Marvel guy, so I never really looked at what they were doing in the 60s.
I'm not 100% sure, but I know Jack Adler was their production guy. And he's Howard Stern's cousin, I think it was. He was like a older cousin, because Howard Stern has told stories about him bringing comics to him. But I'm pretty sure he must have been. And I think I've read stories about Neil Adams talking to him about coloring certain things a certain way. So maybe Nick Cardy colored that himself. Maybe Jack Adler colored it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna have to look him up. Someone must have had written some on one of these comic magazines that have come out of the last 20 years from T.O. Morrow. Someone must have did an article on Jack Adler. Do you know anything about him, Paolo?
Nope.
No. Like I said, I think he was a behind-the-scenes guy, so at DC for a long time. He was their Saul Brodsky. But probably in a suit and better paid. Didn't have to do everything by the seat of his pants.
Yeah, you do a Google search for him, a lot of stuff does pop up.
Yeah, he's not unknown, but I've just never read anything about him. And what years does it say he was at DC?
He worked at DC Comics since the mid-1940s to the early 80s.
Wow.
Date of birth is 1917, and he passed in 2011.
Wow. There must be some interviews with him.
He's listed as a writer, penciler, inker, cover artist, colorist, letterer, creator.
Yeah. Adams revolutionized
did everything.
Coloring. Yeah, he did. Like I said, he was in on the Office. He was their production guy for a long. I think he ran their production department eventually. Yeah,
he attended the High School of Art and Design.
Adams knew all about coloring from his commercial art stuff, so he was into making sure they could do stuff. I wonder what was the most expensive book we all virtually ripped up. I don't know. Good question. Certainly not the indie comics from 1988.
I promised to rip Amazing Spider-Man number 300.
Just for that, I'm going to have to make a rip read in a slab with that in it.
Yeah, you're gonna Amazing Spider-Man number 300, New Mutants number 85. What else?
All that good stuff.
Sure. I mean, first Cable and first Venom. So we need something. Well, let's not make Carnage so that we don't have two Spider-Man books.
Right.
But what else could we have there?
Sleepy's going to rip Hulk 181.
As long as you keep 180, which is the real first appearance.
First Cable is 87.
87, yeah.
All by Rob Liefeld with no help.
There's an interview with Jack in Comics. Oh, this is not opening up.
Oh. Won't tolerate Liefeld slander here. No way.
A website called Nerd Team 30.
I'm going to slab Ravage 2099, then smash it. I still have to make some fake slabs. I've been wanting to do that, but I just haven't wanted to do it enough to actually do it. Because I've got from my LCS from John, who works there, cracking out some issues he bought. He's a Thor collector, so he was buying some of the early Journey into Mysteries, but he didn't want them. He wanted them raw, not in slabs, but he had to buy them in slabs. So he cracked them out when I was there, and I was like, oh, let me take those. So I have like 5 or 6 cracked slabs that I want to make my own comic and put it in there, like a Spinal Tap comic that goes to 11.
Right.
But that means I got to make a Spinal Tap. I got to mock together a comic and da 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 da.
Oh, I have a list of mock covers that I always like. Oh, I'm going to work on that.
Yeah,
I never do.
There should be a comic of AFPC avenging Liefeld. Chris Girusso will get on board with him. Offenses. Oh, there's the interview with Jack Adler. I'll have to read that later.
Then after that, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff, so we could really deep dive into it.
Yeah, there has to be. There has to be a bunch of stuff on him. I mean, he was around for so long, and even after he retired, I'm sure he was hardly unknown. I think he used to get mentioned in some of the DC books in the 70s. And some of
and the big covers are popping up, like the Green Lantern ones where he's teaming up with Green Arrow.
Did he color those? Did
it seems to be showing it as like under images for Jack Adler colors.
Yeah,
those books are popping up. The Wonder Woman ones, Mr. Miracle, Jimmy Olsen.
How far have you gotten with the Gatsby illustrated book, Jared? I've got a lot of illustrations right now. Now I just have to kind of order them into a book. I must have like between 10 and 15 illustrations, which is enough to make an illustrated version of the book. But now I actually have to do the design and layout. I have the first thing I did was get all the text and typeset it. So now I have to just kind of make the illustrations into some sort of cohesive design, which is kind of what did I miss? You missed us discussing Jack Adler and us not knowing anything about him.
There's an interview with him in Comic Book Marketplace.
Yeah. my next big step is to stop making Gatsby illustrations and making a Gatsby book. But so far, I haven't really wanted to stop making Gatsby illustrations. So we'll see how, it should only take me a week to make it into a coherent book, or at least get it started. But I just haven't taken the time to do that. That's what I have to take the time to do. Matter of fact, I made another illustration. And sometimes I'm just doing weird stuff. It's like at the beginning of this year, I said to myself, the Great Gatsby is in the public domain. I want to make my own illustrated version of it. But I was having a problem with it because I'm not really an illustrator. I'm an artist. In terms of what an illustrator does, is they read a book, pick a scene, and then kind of show you what's in that scene. That's their and usually they work with an editor who tells them, it's like, Great Gatsby, we want the big house, we want him, we want a party going on. And that stuff all kind of encumbers me. So I have to kind of get that all out of my head and just go, what do I want to do with it? What do I have to say about the Great Gatsby? Because I'm not good at making a literal illustration. I'm not going to be able to draw a literal Great Gatsby party where I have to research all what would the pool look like? But that's just not, I don't want to go. So I have to keep getting out of my own head and do my own thing. It's been going well. But I ended up with one this week where there's a moment in the Gatsby book. First of all, when Gatsby first came, we now see Gatsby as sort of this great American novel that is making a statement on the American way of life and class and social structure and this and that. But when it first came out, it was also really thought of as a gangster novel. Because the Great Gatsby is actually tied up with, he's involved, he's not quite a gangster himself, but he's involved with gangsters. He's like the face man of the gangsters. And so at one point, and the novel is all about him trying to recreate his love with this woman, Daisy. So at one point, he's having an affair with her. And what he was also doing, the big parties were, he's made his money doing shady stuff. He moved out to Long Island to be across the bay from Daisy. And he's been throwing huge, and he hasn't seen her in 5 years. In the 5 years he hasn't seen her, she's a high society woman. She got married and has a millionaire husband. So he's now a millionaire. So he moves in across the bay in Long Island from her, on Long Island across a little bay, West Egg Bay, a little bay, not the Long Island Sound. And he just throws parties and hopes she'd show up one night. So he's got 25 servants. They're constantly cleaning the place. They're constantly throwing these parties every weekend. So finally, in the middle of the book, he hooks up with Daisy, finally, has an affair with her. So at this point, he gets rid of all his servants because he doesn't want them gossiping in town, and hires this shady family who his gangster friend wants to do a favor for. He's like, I think he thinks they might once have ran a hotel in Europe somewhere. So the narrator of the story, Nick, at one point during this period of time, hasn't seen Gatsby in a while, so he goes over to Gatsby's house that he lives next door of, and rings the doorbell, and the shady new butler answers the door and is like, yeah, I'll tell him you called, and closes the door. And for some reason that it's like a 2-paragraph scene, but I decided to do an illustration of the shady butler answering the door. And it's kind of like a scene that no sane illustrator would ever pick to illustrate. And I had to figure. I ended up doing this in my dreams of things kind of style because there's all sorts of weird stuff behind it. But I was like, even finding the way I wanted to do it. Here's the. First, I tried to do it in my monster style. and he just faded, and it's too monstrous. I'll see if I can combine them digitally to do something. But it's like that's what I was doing on Gatsby just this week. Just and it's weird. And the whole time I'm doing it, I'm like, this is a weird scene to draw. The more illustrations, the better. Exactly. That's why I'm trying to get a bunch of them. I don't know if anyone here is into it, but the new Predator movie is fantastic. It reminded me of the old Dark Horse comic. Oh, okay.
I was curious.
Keep that in mind. Yeah. Yep, you can watch full-on Comanche audio version too. Oh, wow. And have a good one. AFPC. But yeah, now I have to actually make those illustrations into that. I have to do the design part of it. Which I don't know if you've ever found this, Wilson. I find it more hard to do book design of my own stuff than of someone else's.
Yes. Doing my own comic book, it's for me, it's like pulling teeth. Doing somebody else's, that's fine. Like I could do thumbnails for other people's comics, and I've done it. But doing it for my own, I just don't know what barrier that I'm hitting. Like I would rather ink my own stories. I would rather color. I'd rather letter it than actually pencil it myself. I don't know what it is. Where it's like if I'm doing sketch cards for other companies, I could draw Jawas all day on Star Wars and R2D2, no problem. If I have to sit there and draw my own characters, my creator own stuff, it's like I don't know. I almost feel like part of it is that I should be working on something I'm getting paid for instead of doing something in my own stuff because my own stuff is still fun.
Right.
Should I be doing that when I should probably be doing something that has a deadline with it?
I think that's also part of the artist illustrator divide. It will defy normal Roaring Twenties illustration cliches. Certainly did that. Because like I said, what you're describing too is being an illustrator. When you're an illustrator, being an illustrator is a different skill than being an artist. There's tons of overlap. It's not like they're separate. But when you're an illustrator, you're performing a task. And you never have to ask yourself, what am I going to draw? Because that's the task. The task is set by whatever the job is. So like you said, you can draw Jawas all day because that's the job. It's like,
Right.
It's like, I know this task. This is what I have to do. This is what I'm getting paid to do. When you're on your own being an artist, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what do I want to do? And a lot of people don't know how to answer that question for themselves. They, like me being the opposite, I'm so used to asking myself, what do I want to do? And coming up with ways to answer that question. That when someone asks me to illustrate something, I'm all verklempt. I don't know what to do because it's kind of like, I have to draw this the way you want me to draw that. That's not my process. So for me, it's the complete opposite. Like I said, when I even when I'm doing this illustration on like this Gatsby illustration on my own, I have to stop myself from thinking, well, what would a Gatsby illustrator here do? Oh, he'd pick this one wonderful scene and break it down into its component parts and draw, reference this component part, get to see what this, and draw it, and it comes out mediocre because I'm all in my own. I'm second guessing myself constantly because I'm trying to do something that this hypothetical editor wants me to do. Even it's a weird thing. Mm-hmm. That would be actually funny, and I would like to read it. A book about all the illustrations are about the random background things. Yeah, that's. You know what I actually want to do? I haven't been able to do this yet. One of the things I do is, I do a strip that runs on Sundays called Drifting and Dreaming. And it comes from my art cards, where I draw these art cards, where I have just these little heads and they're saying something to you. So it's got two of these and a middle thing. So I've drawn 1,000 of these little faces. This is actually card 1719. They're not all cartoon art cards. There's some regular ones. But at one point in the Gatsby novel, all he does is list a bunch of people who were at Gatsby's parties that summer. And the list is like 75 people. And I was like, I'm trying to figure out a way where I can leverage all these weird little drawings that I've got and draw all 75 of those people. Because I'm sure no one has ever done that before with the Gatsby book. But just have every person he mentions in that list of people just come up with a little drawing for them. I just know it's gonna. I haven't done it because I know how much time it's gonna take. But I was like, if I can cut down on the time just by sort of leveraging these, I'm gonna see if I can. Just like make this one of the, I have to redraw it, and put it. You can't have a mushroom hairpiece, but I think that's one of the things I want to do for this, because it's just like 75 little people which, as he lists them, have a drawing for each one. I was like, I think I can do that. But it's going to take time. Enough illustrations alongside the text could change the interpretation of the theme. Yeah, that's what I have to design too. That's cool, Jared, go for it. Yeah, I'm going to have to. That's going to be the design part of it too. That's all. Enough illustrations alongside the text could change the interpretation of the themes and tone. Do I want to do that? How am I going to do that? That's like the designer aspect of it, and I find that's one of the he can have a mushroom hairpiece. It's your book, exactly. That's why I got to get out of my own head sometimes. But yeah, it's like the designer part of me has to answer these questions, but I haven't answered them yet, which is why I haven't started the design part.
Yeah, I would, in my mind, when you were talking about it, it's like the thing that, you mentioned about the mansion and the pools and stuff like that. My gut instinct is to do basically draw it like a Where's Waldo type of book, where it's a 2-page spread of the big mansion, the pool, and then that's where you put all 75 people. Where it's like, you'd be searching for them, and where is Gatsby in this one? Did Daisy show up for that one? But again, you could, being that it is your own book, you could do anything.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah, but it's like it's weird. Jared, the designer, hasn't answered those questions yet too, because Jared, the illustrator artist, is answering different questions than Jared, the designer. So it's kind of like it's sometimes putting in and I find, like I said, it's easier to design somebody else's work because I don't have the same emotional attachment.
Right.
I can, if it's somebody else's artwork, I can look at it more objectively and go, oh, I like that. Let's emphasize this. Let's do that. Let's go here. Let's go there. When it's my own work, it comes with a lot more baggage. It's like, oh, here's the drawing I spent 4 days on. Here's the drawing I knocked off in an hour and a half. The 4 days one should be better than the hour and a half one, but the designer might not think that. So it's kind of like there's a lot of conflict. Mm-hmm. In a way, Jared, you're an interpreter going beyond illustration. Yeah, that's the artistic aspect of it too. Giant, big, extravagant parties need the mushroom guy. I'm going to have to think about it because I've drawn a couple. I've drawn a couple of the party scenes, but now I'm getting an idea for putting those 75 people in the parties and having mushroom hats and everything. I'll have to see what I can do with that. Can you consult with a designer friend on this project? Maybe I can. Maybe I should assign it to my students. We'll have to see. Yeah, because like it really is sometimes tough to do design around your own work. Your artistic routine and rhythm is fascinating. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really do have sort of my own. I have a few different. I've always liked to keep kind of different routines going too, because I specifically keep different things going just so I don't get bored because I get. And actually, if you go to radiantcomics.com, I've been writing about my artwork for years. On that on my blog. So I've got all sorts of different pieces about my routine and looking at stuff. If you're ever interested in that, you can find it through jaredosborne.com. There's a link to radiantcomics.com, or just go to Radiant Comics. The last comic I got for the week is everybody's favorite, Spawn. Still $2.99. I have to say, I actually liked this issue. This was, once again, Rory McConville, extra script by Todd McFarlane, and Carlo Barbieri. But it was and it was funny. I knew more about this one because from listening to that comic kayfabe, reading the transcripts to the Neil Gaiman lawsuit. Because in the have you ever seen that, Wilson?
I've seen some of it, and I read some stuff years ago, back when while it was going on.
Comics kayfabe, that's their name, right? All of a sudden I forgot.
Cartoonist kayfabe.
Cartoonist kayfabe.
Yeah, those readings are they're amazing. It's like amateur theater, but better.
That's what this whole thing is about, a confrontation between Spawn and Cagliostro. And that's listening to those is where I learned who Cagliostro was and what his deal was, listening to those. So I was like, I understood this issue more just from having listened to those. But it was a solid, once again, a big Spawn war going on, bloody. But this issue was all about Spawn and Cagliostro and what the heck they were going to do and trying to come together and then being enemies again. And it was a solid issue.
Oh, okay.
I can't say that about all the issues of Spawn I've read. Once again, a friend who I haven't seen in a while was at the comic shop. And he's like, "You're buying Spawn?" I was like, I feel an obligation to. It's the last $2.99 book. If it goes to $3.99, I'm dropping it. But as long as it's $2.99, I'm buying it. Because I say comics should be cheaper, and here's a cheaper one.
Right.
I got to put my money where my mouth is. Vice Admiral Acre. Anything else in this before we finish up? Nightfall double feature. Man, I can't believe how many Vampirella and Red Sonja comics are coming out each month. I mean, who's buying them?
I don't know. I'm working on the card sets, and they're popular. Yeah. You know, so whoever's buying them, God bless you. You're keeping me busy.
Though I have noticed on TikTok lately, because I've been on TikTok lately, maybe in the last month for the first time in ages. And there are younger comic fans out there. I was like, whoa, look, and some of them are even women. Most of them who come up my feed are, but I don't know how that reflects on the buying comics at love. But I'm amazed at because I never see anyone younger buying comics. But on TikTok, they actually do pull lists. They show off what they got for the week. And Marvel, DC, and Indies they get. And I'm always like, oh, cool, someone younger buying comics.
Yeah, that's always great to see, that there is there's still a strong fan base. And, they're even, I watch one TikToker, she goes to different comic book shops She doesn't have a
No.
home shop. She hits all the ones in New York.
Wow. It was like
No.
I've never run into people this young getting comics on YouTube anymore. So I guess they're all on TikTok. I thought you were going to go Cagliostro's gaming and spawn as Todd. It could be. I'll have to read it differently next time.
And that whole thing in itself is weird and crazy because at the end you have was it Angeline? I think her name is. That was the Spawn Hunter.
Oh yes,
And
yes.
ends up at
Angela.
Marvel when it's all
Right.
said and done.
Right. Oh, and Marvel's coming out with Miracle Man again, finally. Not that I have any interest in it anymore, but I just saw that.
I don't either. It's like all I know about Miracle Man at Marvel is that there are always ads for it to be coming out soon,
Yeah.
and I always see a cover. I have never actually seen an issue.
I remember when they first got it back a few years ago, and they started. What's that guy's name? Nick, the original one from the 50s.
Mick Anglo.
Mick Anglo.
Okay.
And they started
I remember.
reprinting his stuff from the 50s. And I looked at it and went, nobody is demanding this stuff. Nobody.
No.
I was like, this is going to kill the whole series, them printing this stuff. And prestige format expensively. And I'm like, I don't understand why Gaiman handed everything over to Marvel. I think he just didn't want it. He just wanted the money and wanted it to live on. That's all I can figure out. That's all.
What I don't understand is that now that they have the
Could be.
character and they have the trade, they don't have a problem with the trademark. Why didn't they just release everything as Marvel Man?
I don't know. That a terrible decision just to piss off Todd. I guess. Yeah, I think he really wasn't interested in doing. He wasn't interested in doing any Angelique, whatever it was.
Angela, no, he wasn't.
I don't think he was. He was interested in getting what was owed him. He just wasn't interested in making any comics about her or Miracle Man.
It still had the original plot, although I suppose at the time maybe he thought that it was going to get all. Everything was gonna be done quickly, and it wasn't. And then the moment passed, and he was busy at the time with his literary projects, which is why I wasn't paying that much attention to the comics.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman has got plenty to do. He doesn't. He doesn't need to be doing other people's stuff.
In the meantime, I finally have Pepe Moreno in my collection.
All right. What do you have? Oh, he's got Batman Digital Justice.
Brazilian edition.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I've got that on my shelf.
I still have. I think I got 2 copies of that book. I think I have
What
one
year
I
did
never
that come out?
opened.
Was that early 90s?
Early 90s. That was.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so I
wanna
got
say
Marvel
it was
for that. I bet I got it there.
91. 91 maybe?
It has been a while.
I think Digital Justice came out around 91, I think. So now I have the 2 computer-generated Brazilian comics. This and Iron Man Crash.
Iron Man Crash. Yep.
You need what was the first? What was the one from First Comics again?
Shatter.
Shatter. Ooh, that was state of the art, baby.
Right.
Look how fancy that is.
Computers. All we need is Hacker Man, the greatest hacker of all time. You guys didn't see the Kung Fury movie?
No.
No.
I don't.
Well, it was available for free on YouTube. It was that one that's for years. It was just it was just the teaser. It's a Swedish filmmaker who wanted to do a movie about the 1980s with everything. And they have the Nintendo Power Glove and the tough cop, the tough loner cop, and the Lamborghini Countach.
I find
Uh,
Miracle Man pretty hard to read nowadays. Yeah, I haven't read it in a while. I have seen Italian Spider-Man though. If you've never seen that one, check it out.
and you can find video clips from the Indian Superman on YouTube.
Carefully show that off. It might hack your motherboard monitor.
Hacking too much time, and then I'll go back in time, and I'll know I've gone too far because there will be laser raptors. That's from the Kung Fury movie.
All right. Well, we should wrap it up for the night. Whew. I got to get a lot of rest. I'm having a barbecue tomorrow.
Have a good time. Say hi to everybody I know.
I'm gonna be on TV tomorrow and Sunday.
All right, TV.
Yeah.
Cool.
Last week I did color commentary. This week I'm gonna do play-by-play. So
we're gonna have to have in a couple of weeks a special edition where Paolo tells us all about what he's doing on TV.
Yeah, then I'm gonna have to. I have to explain European touring car racing to you, and you're going to find it boring.
All right, so everybody out there, have a good night, and we will catch you next time.
Take care, everybody.